storage in a PlayStation 5 by about 200 gigs, like putting a smaller hard drive in it to try to save costs instead of raising price in some territories. Which, given the size of video games, having a smaller hard drive in it seems fucking like a wild choice. I don't know. This is sort of the other kind of piece of a lot of these components as we talk about game difficulty and wanting players to finish the games that they buy and wanting players to enjoy gaming and whatever and you know, also, while all of those conversations are happening, all of these prices are going up in ways that are going to price the casual player out of the market to begin with. And so, you know, younger, more price-conscious players are going to be driven more and more to free-to-play garbage. And, you know, the types of players that are out there going like, I'm waiting for the next high, big-budget, single-player adventure from Sony Computer Entertainment America. Like, that's not a growing segment of players, right? Demographically. Demographically, it seems like the types of players that want those sorts of experiences are only getting older. We'll see where that nets out, right? Obviously, you can always, you know, if they do end up reducing storage in a PS5, you can go buy a hard drive and shove it in there. You just shouldn't have to. I don't know. I bought this PS5 Pro and I did not move the external drive over from my old PS5 because I forgot to. And I haven't needed it since. So I still have about 200 gigs free on this PS5. Those Katamari games are pretty small. Kids are playing that. So that's worked out pretty well. Keanu Reeves is in the news with a single sentence here. IGN interviewed him. It was in the context of an upcoming movie he's in called Good Fortune. It is kind of an interesting, you know, like I kind of clown on the idea of video game sites that cover music and movies and try to be all things to all people and how they are bad at a lot of it. But I will say, it did get IGN in the room with Keanu Reeves as he was promoting a movie so that they could ask him a question about Cyberpunk, which is kind of neat. And just said, hey, would you want to do it again? The quote they've got here is, absolutely, I'd love to play Johnny Silverhand again. That's basically it. But, you know, the nature of the Cyberpunk, obviously they're working on Cyberpunk 2. And the nature of the Cyberpunk story is such that I think it would be kind of weird, you know, like, it would be weird to have him play a major role in a Cyberpunk sequel. But I'm sure that there are certainly, whether it's like some kind of file footage or like his band is showing on a TV in the corner or something, like there's probably a lot of opportunities that you could put Keanu Reeves into that game one way or the other. Because you could also go the other way of having like quote-unquote Johnny Silverhand without it being Keanu Reeves and have that make sense in the world as well. But yeah, I don't know. Not much of a quote because, you know, you're like, hey, guess what's he going to say? Fuck no. I lied when I said that guy was breathtaking. Fuck that guy. You know, what's he going to say? He's going to say, yes, of course, I would love to do it. I would love to work. I love working. As a working actor, I love to be a working actor, right? But I don't know, like, you know, that was he was obviously like a big part of that last game, and I think they could have done a lot better by him in terms of how that game was written, but they didn't. So I don't know. You know, Cyberpunk 2 is, you know, they're describing it as kind of being set in a future, like what the quote here is.
Well, you got an intersection, dude. How the fuck am I supposed to drive through this intersection, dude? Look at it.
Who was
look at it, dude.
Said basically that it is like Chicago gone wrong. Very timely. as the setting of the new Cyberpunk game.
Oh, boom, car right there on my right.
We're to see what they're working on and what a Cyberpunk sequel about a month and a half later.
It's unenjoyable to drive in this game, dude. It's unenjoyable. It's just fucking unenjoyable, dude. You use the pop cultural and all that shit to get over bad game design.
You can go find other.
That's why it just got pretty.
Where I talk at length about Cyberpunk if you want to have that.
Fucking shitty girl who's really pretty.
That game is fucking bad.
That's what GTA is, dude. It's just a bad game, bro. Bad game mechanics, bad driving mechanics. It's all subpar fucking game mechanics. Masked with fucking music.
Yeah, the idea
violence
that next
and
year,
sex.
because that game was written in such a way.
Mediocre game covered.
Maybe it doesn't matter. Of course they did, but maybe playing that game at launch.
Cover of pop culture
the way
mask
the game was presented to players and a lot of this. Fucking wreck. What a wreck.
It's just unenjoyable to be in the world, dude.
You're okay with them. Service games.
Check that out, man.
The hang-on people. The Galaxy Force folks. TimeExtension.com has a story here that Sega has been accused of using the police as their own private goon squad to go and harass someone and basically confiscate a large number of development flash cartridges and consoles. This is...
Excuse me.
This is happening in the United Kingdom, from the looks of it. But basically, a guy who runs like an electronics, like a surplus electronics seller type of operation, came into possession of a bunch of Wii's and 3DS's and like kind of basically old Nintendo hardware. His shop, I guess, his operation was in the city where Sega's building used to be, and then they moved. So probably what happened is when they moved, people got rid of a bunch of shit and just went to e-waste and electronics recycling and just like dumped a bunch of 3DS and DS flash carts and said like, I don't know, this is trash. And so along with hardware, Nintendo development hardware to be specific. This happens, this people, like dev kits end up in the hands of non-developers all the time. When companies go under and a lot of stuff gets sold, like there's a lot of stuff like that. These are builds of games on these flashcards, including stuff that in some cases was unreleased, but generally speaking, it's a bunch of preview builds, a bunch of games, and stuff. For stuff like Sonic Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood, Sonic Generations, Mario and Sonic, The Winter Olympic Games, Phantasy Stars Zero, Alien Infestation, Shinobi, and a DS version of Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure. So this guy was trying to sell this stuff. And so people that were involved in video game preservation, the Video Game Preservation Museum was out there trying to get their hands on these games so that they could dump them and all this stuff, which is, that's a pretty routine, games end up on eBay and you're like, what the hell, let's put a group buy together, we'll pool all our money together and win this auction and dump it in publicly, really, whatever. So they were going down that road, and then the seller kind of went dark on them, and it turns out it's because he got arrested. And so this has gone back and forth where, like, Time Extension has the blow-by-blow on this stuff because the guy who was selling this stuff is saying, like, hey, they had a warrant for my arrest that was unclear. They had this. Like, they basically, like, knocked down his door. Or they came to him and raided him and took this stuff. And, yeah, there's a quote from him here. I was arrested and taken to Bishopsgate Police Station where my DNA, fingerprints, and photographs were taken. I was placed in a cell for around 8 hours. When interviewed, I explained clearly and truthfully the nature of my business, how I lawfully acquired the goods, and that I had paid around £10,000 to a removals worker handling Sega's office clearance. I also explained the due diligence steps I had taken to satisfy myself that the sale was lawful.
What they arrest you for?
It's there's like DSIs, 2DSs, 3DSs, Wii's, and Wii U's. The hardware is probably the actual thing here that got this guy popped, because when you and he would have no way of knowing this, and I think that this is actually like super fucked. Like this is like and as you go through this story, like now the police are trying to get him to sign over a waiver, like releasing his claim to the goods.
What?
Instead of like proving that the warrant was lawful and all of this stuff.
Yeah,
like they're trying to kind of cover their tracks in a way that feels like the cops are very aware that they are in the wrong here.
Yeah. The goods weren't stolen.
This guy has written to the president of Sega saying like, hey man, why don't we just handle this and it doesn't have to be this big crazy thing, like what's going on? And, you know, like basically. So the article is basically, you know, like the situation is that they are alleging that basically Sega told the cops like, hey, this guy stole this stuff, but he didn't. You know, he bought it from an office cleanup kind of thing. The catch is that Sega never should have left the hardware there. The flash carts are probably... The flash carts may very well be covered under the same agreement, but basically when you get development hardware from Nintendo, you are buying it, but it is technically still owned by Nintendo. It is still like, and all these things have stickers, confidential property of Nintendo, all of this. Like, it is still technically Nintendo's property. Even though you, the publisher or developer, are buying these dev kits.
No, then you're leasing them.
And so
you're not buying them. You leased them.
This guy ended up with this stuff in a totally lawful, normal manner of just like, hey, I don't know, we're getting rid of office chairs and computers and all this stuff. And we got all this. I don't know, but I don't even know what this is. And the guy went, I would like to purchase that. And so he bought it. And then Sega, and then as it was probably being publicly sold or whatever, Sega got wind of it, and Nintendo probably got wind of it. Is actually the probable issue here. Is that Nintendo went to Sega and said, hey, what the fuck? Hey, we want our shit back. What the fuck are you doing?
Hey man, see you later, dog.
And Sega went, let me, it's a bad signal. I'll call you back. And then they went and called the cops and said, go arrest this guy, and convinced the cops that that was the right thing to do. It's a fucked up story. I'm guessing that is probably how all of this went down.
Yeah,
that would make a lot of sense. But Jesus, man, this is a real mess.
They would have
here.
had to take
and I hope this guy. I hope this guy gets
man.
this shit back. I hope that, you know, at least the games. But you know, development hardware, Nintendo may very well.
I love violence.
Nintendo will certainly have some things to say about that. But this guy's got, I mean, this is a box of like, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This is like 17 or 18 Wii U, like dev kit tablets. And, you know, some Sega of Europe DSi units and you know, like a lot of stuff that if you were Sega of Europe, you would not be using anymore when you moved offices because you don't make games for those platforms anymore, and just like, fuck it, man, yeah, whatever. So yeah, but Sega has not really made any comments about this story up to this point, so we don't really have their version of the story here. But it's
When you set up the needle,
this seems very shitty on their part. The legality of ownership on that hardware is probably something that is up to, you know, like I'm sure that Sega signed some contract that said that they could not sell it, but they're the ones who fucked up and sold it. Like, this is Sega's mistake. The idea that this guy was taken in by the cops and all of this over this material is super disgusting. Speaking of Sega and super disgusting, Panzer Dragoon 2 is getting remade for the PS5, Xbox, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. They announced that this morning. It'll be playable at TGS this year. Your good friends at Forever Entertainment are making it, and thus, it looks fucking awful.
I need the good shit.
The screenshots of this look like a dog pooped on a Saturday.
Like if you
took Panzer Dragoon 2 and then turned on every filter in an emulator. If you turned on Eagle and X2 Psi and every single like pixel crunching garbage interpolation thing you could think of to overly smooth it out, but somehow it still looks like a fucking, it looks like someone asked an AI model to shit out screenshots of a fucking dragon shooting. It is ugly. It is extremely ugly. These screenshots. It'll be playable at TGS, which is happening at the end of this month. It will have remastered music and what they are referring to as enhanced visuals. Modern graphics faithful to the original style. Gematsu.com has this story if you want to see these screenshots for yourself.
Just hill, motherfucker. Told you. Every time. Watch the hill, watch your cards. Got cards waiting for you, bro. See it? Waiting for you, trying to decide which way you're going. Oh my god.
Overly smoothed it out. Like, the textures look fucking awful. Like, it is. How do they keep getting away with this? Truly disturbing. Truly disturbing looking game. But yes, that is in the works. Coming from Forever Entertainment as the publisher, and
no, I can't move my cursor, dude. I can't.
Storm Trident, and it will be playable at the Rainy Frog booth. All your favorite companies are involved.
Run! Whoa! Okay, I didn't see that.
All of them. And our last news story. This is breaking news. I discovered this. I was doing some investigation this morning. Again, I was communicating with Jordan Middler, who is Scotland's premier energy drink reporter over at videogameschronicle.com. He was sending me some screenshots of some drinks that he had acquired while he was in another country, and I was replying to him with photos of this Celsius that my wife gave me.
I can't get like movement control down.
And I said it reminded me of Bang. We got to talking about Bang.
It
and before too long,
around.
I was researching whatever happened to the fucking lunatic that made Bang. Because if you remember, he got driven out of the company at some point because he was a maniac. The company was sold and we changed distributors. And
that's part of it. Jumping in the car, everything's popping off.
So I was like, whatever happened to that guy?
And the radio starts blaring.
On that guy's Instagram page, which was always an extreme fucking nightmare. This lunatic has founded a new energy drink company. And it is billed as the next gen AI energy drink. It is called AI Energy Ultra Dopa. I'm sorry, the full trademark is AI Energy AI Ultra Dopa, the next gen AI energy drink by Jack Owalk.
Sure.
Who is the fucking maniac, who is the absolute maniac behind Bang and Redline.
I'd been better.
And the fucking, I don't know, getting arrested. His whole thing is, his whole vibe is spooky. He seems like he's maybe a bad person. And so as far as I can tell, I don't know if this is real people or not, but they got pictures of ladies holding these drinks, and I don't know if any of these photos are real. I think this might all be AI. I think he might have realized, like, oh, dude, what if we made an AI drink and it's AI influencers marketing our AI drink? And so it's like all the way down this fucking rabbit hole of bullshit. He's found like a new trend to hop onto to also try to attach to energy drinks. It is wonderful. It is like a perfect storm of absolute fucking shit. And if I see these drinks, I'll try them.
What's the holdup?
I don't know what is in them. His drinks are always this weird combination of They try to claim, like, there's a lot of science that they try to claim behind this, and so you see a lot of trademarks and registered trademarks, and we came up with this new compound, cognizin, which is gonna be this whole, and it's really really amazing. Yeah, it's a lot of photos of him standing in front of AI generated like laboratories and fucking insane shit. It's really something else, man. It is some fucking next level horse shit. You and I created the multi-billion-dollar performance energy drink category. Together, we've revolutionized the beverage industry by creating the multi-billion-dollar performance energy drink category, and you and I are going to do it again by creating the vibrant Euphoria energy category with AI energy drink. Like, this is none of this was written by people. Apparently, you will feel Euphoria, like, and he's writing that as like capital UFO. So it's like trying to say like it's alien, like UFO-oria. Because they drummed him out of Bang, like it got sold, like he left Bang under disgrace and lawsuit, or at least lawsuit. And so now he's got to come up with a series of brand new trademarkable insane phrases.
Zippity doo dah, something.
Yeah,
zippity doo dah, zippity day.
It's magical. It's the world's first
not that heavy.
feel-good
Stop.
nootropic phenom. The legendary creator of Redline and Bang Energy, $2 billion beverage giants with a combined $7.25 billion in sales, has raised the bar once again. Bang Energy reached its first billion in sales faster than Coca-Cola, Apple, Disney, and IBM. And it is a picture of him. I'll put this in the Discord. This photo is on this press release is like he's got his hands up to the sky and he's smiling and he's surrounded by logos, but it's not the logo of his current drink. It's the Bang and Redline logo, which he, says that he founded. And then also the logos for Disney, IBM, Coke, and Apple. It's fucking maniacal. It's so good. This guy is fucking out of his mind. Bang, most flavors of Bang tasted like absolute trash. But I welcome this fucking insane man's return to the energy drink industry because Christ. All right, that's the news. The other big happening today is that it's September 9th. And so naturally that is the dual anniversary of both the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. It's the 30th anniversary of the PlayStation, in fact. Did you buy any of their anniversary PlayStation 5? Did you get any of their anniversary stuff? I ended up with this. I had to talk to a Scottish energy drink connoisseur to get this to get one of these PlayStation DualSense Edge gray controllers. But
send them ducats over here.
I'm surprised that they didn't like restock. There was talk that they were going to bring out some of the gray stuff again, kind of closer to the actual anniversary here in the U.S. Maybe not like not the Pro or anything like that, but that they were going to restock some of that stuff. I think they may have. Anyway, PlayStation's doing this is they're doing some weird social media thing for the anniversary on their blog, but the PlayStation is
give me them chips.
Good. I don't really, the game industry is better for having PlayStation in it. That was something that when Sony was first getting into video games, and it was like 1994. Before it was even out in Japan, and kind of hearing the stories about what Sony was up to, and I've told the story before, but it was very easy at the time. As someone who was covering video games, like you had seen these big electronics manufacturers get into gaming and really shit the bed. You watched Philips show up and produce the CDI. You watched the 3DO come out for hundreds and hundreds of dollars with and they did not have good games. And the CDI was the fucking CDI, so obviously. And so you had this kind of post 16-bit, like post SNES malaise here, where like business guys seemed like they were looking for what's next. And so you had this slow shift into compact disc technology, with the Sega CD, the Turbo CD, and those things happening there in sensible ways, where you're just like, okay, I don't know, these aren't the most exciting games in the world, but they're games. You had PCs getting further and further into CD-ROMs and full motion video and the multimedia future, and you know, we would get Myst and stuff like that. But then you had these big companies come in and say like, oh, well, this isn't, you know, the Super Nintendo, that's for kids. Like, these games are for kids. This is garbage. Fuck this shit. We have the future of interactive entertainment. It's the CDI or it's the 3DO. I mean, the pitches were basically the same. And the Jaguar would kind of get lumped into that, I think, unfairly in some ways, but also the Jaguar was very much in that same bucket of like, this is the future of video games. They had a very different vision than 3DO and CDI did, but it was still like, oh, okay, you're trying to, you know, you're moving things forward with, you're playing the hand that you were dealt, and it's not a good hand. And so, you know, when Sony came along, it was easy to scoff. When you heard these stories about like, oh, Sony's getting serious about video games, you're like, oh, like look for the Sega CD, you know, because you saw Sony ImageSoft had a few games out there, and they weren't, you know, like, what am I like? Oh, well,
Hey, I had that
Willie
now.
Beamish is the, you know, like, it wasn't, you know, like it was not something that you were necessarily immediately excited for, because you would see, yeah, and the Pioneer Laser Active, I think, gets lumped into this as well. It's something that's like, here's this hyper expensive thing, it has like 7 games on it. And they were all kind of spinning their own version of the future, and so when Sony's plans started to form up, when they started to coalesce a little bit, because, you know, everyone had heard like, oh, Sony's going to do a CD-ROM with Nintendo, and this is going to happen, and then as that stuff fell apart, you know, it very quickly shifted to, oh, Sony's doing their own thing. And it was extremely easy to not take any of that seriously. You know, it was extremely easy to look at that as like, oh, here's another company that doesn't know a damn thing about video games, who's going to wander into this space and stumble around with a bunch of garbage, and fuck this, I'm so tired. But it turns out they had hired all the people that got tired of getting beaten up over at Sega. Like all of the Sega of America people, and some of the Nintendo folks even, you know, had been tired of that fucking rat race. Some of those folks ended up over at Sony, and you know, and they knew how to market a console. They knew how to get that thing in front of people. But more importantly, you know, the developers back in Japan building the first games and building the hardware and all of that stuff actually fucking nailed it. You know, like they had the goods. That's the difference, right? They actually had the goods. The 3DO didn't have the goods. Like, Trip Hawkins could tell a good story, right? Trip Hawkins, the founder of Electronic Arts. Everyone loves EA, and at that time, everyone did. You know, so he had some cachet in the video game business. It was Trip Hawkins. You're like, okay, all right. But the 3DO did not have the goods. PlayStation did, you know, like the polygons they put on screen looked mind-blowing at the time compared to other stuff you had seen, you know. I mean, hey, Sylphid on the Sega CD looked fucking awesome, but what if there were even like Star Fox looked really neat, but what if there was way more and it looked better, and like all that stuff, and so it was easy to see the first time you saw a PlayStation of just like, oh shit, these are real video games. These look fucking crazy compared to everything we've seen up to this point. You know, you were starting to see more and more of the Saturn software, and it looked beyond that already. And the Saturn was already on shelves, and you know that in no small part was a contributor to, you know, Sega's kind of ongoing failure to succeed in the console space. And so, like it was such a land shift. It was such a huge and immediate shift away from everything that had come before it. I really feel like the release of the PlayStation, as much as it's kind of built on the shoulders of giants, like I said, some of those folks came from other places, and like ultimately the PlayStation and the Saturn are not that different in a grand sense. Obviously, you get down to the nitty gritty, why one looks better than the other sometimes, and that goes both ways. But it did feel like this like the industry shifted quickly, almost immediately. And PlayStation was immediately hot in a way that Sega was floundering. They had the 32X, they had the Sega CD, they had the Saturn, like all this stuff that they were just kind of stumbling around. Like Sega seemed completely lost by September 95. And the Saturn had been out for a while. They had seemed lost for a long time here in the States. And Nintendo felt like, they were stubbornly sticking to old technology, right? And they would see that through with the N64 and sticking to cartridges. And they spent all this time trying to market their way out of that technology choice and trying to say like, oh, well, you're still waiting for a CD to load. You could be gaming. And then you're like, oh, by the way, N64 games still have to load too. And they look like your eyes went bad. They're so blurry. But you had like Nintendo trying to say like, look at Donkey Kong Country. And you're like, yeah, look at Donkey Kong Country. Fuck off. Are you crazy? But yeah, man, the game industry felt like it changed overnight, and more developers started lining up for more, to develop for PlayStation, and it felt pretty immediate. There was no moment once the PlayStation was out in the States. I had seen one when they came out in Japan a couple of times, but there was no moment with the PlayStation where you were like, I wonder if this is going to work out. I wonder, because like when the Jaguar came out, you buy it and you're like, well, these games are neat. I wonder if this thing's going to have a future. I wonder if this thing's going to take off. I wonder if this thing's going to be supported for years to come, or whatever it is, right? You're just like, is this going to be a success? Am I going to be playing Jaguar games in 5 years? Will there be Jaguar? The Saturn launch was weird enough that you kind of were just like, I don't know, I guess this is fine, but like Sega's not been getting it done lately. And with the PlayStation, it felt like, okay, this is the video game system now. Like this is the thing now. Like all this other stuff is old. It's done. It's whatever. Polygon Man is here to stay. It was crazy, like looking back on it and thinking about it, it was crazy how quickly that shift really felt like it happened, But I think everyone realized that Sony was very serious about it. They were putting substantial money behind it. They were putting all of that stuff out. They were, they had their own games, and Namco was on board with arcade ports that looked fucking crazy. There was just a lot of stuff lining up there at the time. Philosoma was coming, Mortal Kombat 3, all these amazing video, Kalik, whatever. A lot of games lined up there early at the launch. But yeah, man, it really felt like all of this stuff had just been replaced. Not that Nintendo was done or anything like that. It wasn't a case of like, oh, well, Nintendo was super fucked. But, it was like Nintendo still had the biggest names in gaming and all of that. And Sega still had Sonic, though Sonic would never be Sonic again. Once they went polygonal, it would take them a very long time to put out a Sonic game that appeased fans of, I don't know. Yeah, the power of the PlayStation in those early days was not to be sneezed at. And the PS2 was a landmark. The launch of the PlayStation 2 in the US was a landmark event. It was the big, crazy overnight lines, sales, all this. Like, it was wild. The release of the PlayStation 2, there was nothing like, I had not seen anything like it up to that point. Like, the excitement from players around it. Because the release of the PlayStation was like a relatively subdued affair. Like, the actual launch of it. It didn't seem like, like the marketing machine hadn't really spun up yet. It would take word of mouth and games and some of this other stuff to happen before it really kind of became a factor. But, I went to the Northgate Mall and I took 30 Genesis games in a big milk crate and I set them on the counter and said, give me a PlayStation, because that was the deal that they had cooked up at the time. And I didn't have $300. At the time, I was out of work. I was between jobs. So I was like, here. And got my PlayStation 1. And yeah, man, that was that. They've had an interesting run. It felt like the PlayStation immediately rose to the top. And Nintendo would have the Nintendo's answer to it, the N64, for as much as people love it, and to be serious about it for a moment, the N64 was an interesting device, right? It has games that changed gaming on it, between Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, and I think they really came up with the blueprint for modern kind of 3D platforming and action adventure and a lot of that, like that template became something that a lot of people, cribbed from for years afterwards, right? The N64 is a very important machine in all of this transition to polygons and whatever, right? But it was the PlayStation that, I think ultimately was the thing that made compact discs for games make a lot of sense for people. The load times were substantial. I mean, some games were really rotten about it. Like, and Mortal Kombat 3 sucked in its own weird way, because you couldn't, like, it would hitch and pause before you did the fatality because it had to load the fatality into memory. And so you would run up and do the motion, and then it would stop for a second, read the CD, and then the fatality would happen, and you'd be like, okay, yeah. Or if you were playing as Shang Tsung and trying to morph into other characters, they had to load the sprites off the disc, and so the whole game would halt like it was compiling shaders or something. God damn it.
Shaders.
And, like there were trade-offs. There were trade-offs in the move to compact disc, but the trade-offs felt immediately worth it. Even as a Mortal Kombat fan, the move to CDs on the Saturn, I played Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 on the Saturn more than I played regular Mortal Kombat 3 on the PlayStation, but alas. The release of the PlayStation, it was huge. I don't know, like you know that, but I, as someone who was kind of there and around, and that was me kind of getting started still. Like I was, I'd worked for a magazine for a while, and kind of, I'd been to a bunch of trade shows by that point, and had covered Sega at a time when Sega was very successful. But I also started covering Sega around the time that the Sega CD was coming out. And so it was a case of like, Sega is very successful. They are their marketing is hitting on all cylinders. They seem like the coolest thing out there. And then the Sega CD, I was very excited about the Sega CD. And then they hit their second year. They hit their second wave of software. And you're like, okay, what's next for Sega CD? Right? You're like, okay, well, Sewer Shark was neat. It's not a good game, but it's like interesting. And there are some neat games on this thing. And I don't know, we could play Wonder Dog. No, we do not play Wonder Dog. The early days of Sega CD were interesting. But then there was no real good follow-up on it. You had all that stuff at launch that was just like, okay, you've got this Marky Mark game, and you've got CNC Power Factory, the CNC Music Factory game, which was called Power Factory, the make your own music video games in excess, and that stuff was interesting. It was neat. And you had some games that were coming out of Japan. You know, like the thing I always say is, you know, if you look at the games coming out on the TurboGrafx,
yeah, I've been lifting a lot
because of the way the TG16 was built, the PC Engine, if you will. They used their CD in very different ways. You know, they were not real big on FMV. They were more about like, here's a cool shooter, and now it has Red Book audio soundtrack and voice acting. But it's still like anime ladies inside of a spaceship, or, you know, like whatever, right? You know, they were still kind of making very traditional Japanese video games, but it just had better music now. You know, that's at the time it was less impressive than the competition because Sega was doing so much more. But I think if you go back and play those games now, like, they've aged very well for what they were, right? Big Apple 3M says TurboGrafx is so sick, and I agree with you now. At the time, I did not. At the time, I was like, these games like are foolish. Like these games don't, like, whatever, man. And when you take into account the entirety of the PC Engine library and everything that came out in Japan that we didn't have access to then, because when I think of the TurboGrafx 16, I think of Battle Royale, the shitty 5-player wrestling game.
You want Grove Street on
I think of Bravo Man.
Screwed up, man. Screwed up.
And then eventually Bomberman, and eventually, you know, like Bonk, when Bonk would come out. But I think of Heath Courage in Alpha Zone, which is not a great game. Yes, Chu Man Fu, of course. I think of China Warrior, and how the guy that I went to school with that had TurboGrafx tried to say China Warrior was sick, dude. Look at how big this guy is. He's so big on screen. And you're like, yeah, this game plays like shit. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, yeah, that guy's big on screen. This game is trash. What is wrong with you? China Warrior is fucking terrible.
But it certainly is the food of a night.
But yeah, you know, I think like they would use their CD add-on very differently than Sega did, and then, you know, Sony would use it differently all over again, right? Because they were going for more kind of polygonal graphics, and, you know, you had some FMV in there as well, but, like, you know, it was a very different, you know, and they had prioritized polygons in a way that Sega hadn't quite gone as far on the Saturn, and so you had that differentiating the two consoles that were, you know, ostensibly part of the same generation, and the PlayStation, man, the PlayStation. I think about all the first party stuff that came out PS1 era, and just like how quickly they expanded their operations, and how quickly they had to start new studios, and you know, 989 Sports, get them up and running, and, you know, they had to get Game Day out because they didn't know if Madden was going to come over, and Madden and Game Day competing with each other, polygonal football games at a time when that was still a new thing, and, you know, there was just so much happening. And then you had the DualShock controller coming out alongside Rallycross and Ape Escape, and just the rise of analog controls as being a standard thing on all consoles, and everything else there. It was such a crazy... It was moving so fast. And Sony was moving so fast. You know, they're like, okay, now we've got this other studio, we've got Siphon Filter, we're doing this thing, we're doing... You know, like, the number of studios that they spun up and got games coming out here in the West, and the Western output from Sony Computer Entertainment America, on top of everything that Psygnosis was doing out of the UK, and, you know, that Sony Europe was doing on their own as well, and everything that Japan was making.
Don't stop right in front of me, please.
Escape, or Jumping Flash, even, you know, just like there was so much stuff happening on the PlayStation 1. And when you look at the time frame that all of that came together, for them to like get into the game business in a real way, launch a console, realize that it's super big, like fucking start more and more and more and more studios, like how quickly their operation fucking blew up. It's wild. And then all of the third-party relations they were doing, they, you know, getting, you know, whether it was just the enticement of a CD-based console and what Square wanted to do with Final Fantasy, and just all of the third parties that came along that to make games for this thing. Like, it had so many different styles of game coming from so many different parts of the world. It's one of the interesting things about playing all these NES games. And seeing how many of them came out of Europe and still have that kind of like that European platformer design sensibility, that kind of Amiga, Commodore 64 style of action game where you're like, all right, we've got big arpeggiators and limited inventory, and we're going to go and do the, you know, like the Turricans and the Dizzies of the world. Like seeing all of that happening there, because, you know, the NES wasn't really a huge factor in Europe. There was a story going around, I think Time Extension had this story too, but it was an interview with someone who worked on Clair Obscur, and someone I think from Blizzard.
Oh my God, what's happening?
Streets Rage 4, and kind of talking about like their inspirations and their origins as game developers and everything. And they both were from like Western France, and they both were just like, yeah, you know, we got a, one of them, I think their first console was a Mega Drive, and one of them was a Master System. And it was this reminder about like, oh, how different the console and computer and just like the gaming platform structure was in that era.
Okay, break time.
And
it just tells you, the game will literally tell you, dude, it's time to take a break. You can't play right now. Can't play right now.
Was it like Bandai? I think
Just put it down, dude. Can't play right now.
There. So like Nintendo didn't even take Europe as a serious market until,
I don't know, maybe if you turn it off, turn it back on, might help.
Maybe later in the SNES cycle they started to kind of pick it up, but like but like the reaction for people was the funny thing, because it was like it was a bunch of like, you know, because like social media sucks, right? So like the news story wasn't necessarily about that. It was about a bunch of people being completely incredulous and saying like, I don't think they're telling the truth. I think there's no way these guys could have made these games if they hadn't played Nintendo games growing up.
Okay.
Which is like bonkers.
They fired a gun and everyone went crazy.
Line in the sand for lunatics to draw. But these are lunatics. You can't reason with them. They're out of their fucking minds, right?
You're supposed to be parked up here, dude.
It's another kind of fascinating thing. But like we think about like all of that stuff kind of carrying forward.
You're parked right behind me, dude, in a cop car.
Is such a unifying moment for the world, because it kind of clears away a lot of that cruft. A lot of the design sensibilities
a lot of the trust.
That came out of Europe, you know,
there is
kind
no
of
trust.
Started on the Spectrum and made their way through the Commodore 64 into the Amiga, the Micro or whatever. Like a lot of those sensibilities are brought to bear in polygonal games.
Here,
dude.
To
do different things.
I forgot. It'll break you, bro.
And we saw like as Psygnosis kind of rewrote the book
break you, dude.
You know, European game development or something, right? At least to some extent. But then you've got Japan firing on a lot of cylinders too, and a lot of third-party developers coming out of the woodwork to make games for PlayStation at that point, while everything in the US was blowing up too. You know, and we would see this kind of transition, you know, as companies would transition out of arcades into the home, and, you know, so you have like Midway going through the stuff that they went through. That wouldn't happen until later in the 90s. But they were there on the PlayStation too. They're like, okay, well, we've got to make Robotron X, and we've got to make, you know, Mortal Kombat. They took their publishing stuff away from Acclaim at that point and started publishing their own games. Around that time, there's some late SNES games that I think that they published, but like around that time is when Acclaim stopped publishing the Midway stuff. And you had all of these studios here in the States that were coming up and either starting around this stuff or that existed for a while and you know, transitioned over to the PlayStation. And so you really had this kind of like this time when you weren't necessarily seeing like, oh, this is a game that clearly got its start on the Amiga and now they're porting it here, and that's why it's on the Mega Drive and not the Super Nintendo or the, you know, or the NES, depending on your time frame, because like, oh, all of these kids grew up with Amigas, and it has the same processor that's in the Mega Drive, and so it makes a ton of sense for it's why all the European stuff happened the way it happened, right? But PlayStation, in so many ways, unifies all of that onto one machine. And I think if you go back and look at just the raw output of all of these regions onto a PlayStation 1, it's fucking crazy. Like, it's really nuts
count the red lights,
see it all kind of laid out. Like, look at all the games that came out on this thing. You had so many games coming out from so many different territories and
another red light, green light, green light, green light.
Whether it was like fucking G Police,
yellow light,
or insane fighting games out of Japan, or all of the sports stuff happening in the U.S. And there was just so much, man. The original PlayStation.
Green light, green light. Green light. Green light.
And then the other kind of September 9th thing is, of course, the Dreamcast, which is Sega's best last shot at taking it back, right?
Red light.
They had been through the ringer at this point. The struggles between
red
Sega
light.
Japan and
Careful
Sega
where
of
we see
America.
red lights. Red lights. Red light. Red light. Red light. Red light. Red light.
It had led to so much market confusion around the release of the 32X and the quick follow-up of the Saturn, and what are they going to back and who's going to make games where, and it ended up being that no one made games for any of it. Like the 32X library, I think the 32X is a really neat device, but you go back and you look at the actual number of games that came out for it, it's fucking crazy how unsupported that thing was. And you get to Saturn, and for a lot of the reasons we just got done discussing about the PlayStation, the Saturn never really had a shot. It was launched in a very confused way. Sega seemed to have no idea what they were doing. They just dumped it on the market and said, "It's available now." Everyone got mad. The Saturn, as it kind of struggled, as they tried to figure out what the identity of the Saturn was in comparison to the PlayStation, they kind of stumbled around. And there's some great games on the Saturn. The Saturn and the TurboGrafx, the Saturn and the PC Engine, I think, are very similar things in the hearts of players, where when you take into account the full worldwide library of these machines, they're magical, right? The Saturn has so many cool things, and because of the Saturn not necessarily being the popular machine at the time, there's a lot of stuff that I think people missed and you can go back to and find to be fascinating. The Saturn did some fighting games much better than PlayStation, with faster loading times, and the RAM cartridge. Bernie stole our fumble. Delve the Funky Homo Sapien said it best when he said, no. When Sega launched the Dreamcast, it felt like, it felt weird. And the Dreamcast, I think, is a weird machine with a weird library, and I think that's what makes it so cool. When we imported our Dreamcast, this is obviously before September 9th, because that's the US release date. But when we imported a Dreamcast, and it came, and it's got the orange box, and you look at it, it's got like the Japanese businessman's picture on it, and he looks confused. And you look at the Dreamcast box, and you're like, what am I looking at here? What the fuck is happening?
Red light.
And then you unbox it, and you play like Godzilla Generations, and you're like, what the fuck? What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing?
Or incoming. The early Japanese Dreamcast games were not extremely impressive. And so importing a Dreamcast was a really weird thing, because we got it, and there wasn't a lot out for it, and it was like that Godzilla game and a few other things.
Red light, red light, red light. They're all red lights, dude. Let's see if I get more red lights over here.
Bad.
Red light.
Everyone got really hung up on the name. Everyone got really
red light, red light.
for a while there.
Dude.
Eventually, it just didn't. Like anything, it just didn't. But at the time, it was still like,
red light up here.
I think there was still a feeling of like, well, surely they will change the name for the U.S. market. By the time this thing comes to the States, they probably won't call it Dreamcast. They'll have some other thing for it. Obviously, they didn't change it. I don't think it mattered. Like, they could have named it anything. It wouldn't have mattered. But the U.S. launch for the Dreamcast was weird, man. Because, you know, it was like we got a lump of games in kind of all at once, and it was like, here's the U.S. launch lineup. And I think Soul Calibur wasn't a U.S. Well, it was not a Japanese launch game, that's for sure. But I want to say it came out like a couple of days early in Japan. Is that what it was? That it was. Let me look here. Okay, so it was August 5th.
I'm trying so hard just to barely move that cursor.
September 9th in North America.
Like, I'm trying so hard to barely move that thing.
And so because we had imported a Dreamcast, there were a couple of games coming out of Japan that we were able to get our hands on early that way. And so we had already played quite a bit of Soul Calibur by the time the U.S. release had come out.
I can't move my cursor, dude.
The weird thing about the Dreamcast launch for me, the thing I remember about the games, you know, there's a lot that I remember about what I was doing that day and all that other stuff. But like, when I think about the games that launched in the US, it felt like a very weird transition from like, I don't really know what the Dreamcast is. There's a lot of there are weird games out on the Dreamcast. It's a weird thing. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with it. Or like, you know, there's some Japanese arcade stuff, you know, like this Soul Calibur thing's coming out, and it's great. But like there's this Godzilla thing and this and that. Like, you know, the Virtua Fighter 3 TB is not as good as VF2, and you know, it was weird. There was weird stuff. And then the US launch came. And suddenly you had like 15 very traditional video games dumped on it. And so it went from like, this kind of ephemeral, like, I'm not really sure what the Dreamcast is going to be, to, oh, look at this. It's a boxing game with crazy guys in it. And, oh, look, okay, you got a football game. Okay, yeah. This is an arcade port of a basketball. Okay, you've got... here's Mortal Kombat 4. Okay, I get it. And it weirdly, it grounded the Dreamcast in a really weird way for me. Where it was like, suddenly, here's a bunch of games where you're just like, oh, yeah, these are just games like any other thing. Like the Dreamcast, it's just another machine. Man. Like, it's more powerful, but it's not that much more powerful than the PS1. And, okay, I get it. And in the U.S., the Dreamcast, I don't know, like it fared better than we'd have to go look at numbers to actually say that for sure. But like, I look at the Dreamcast as like, well, this is more interesting than Saturn was. But it was still a case where like the Japanese market was way more interesting for the Dreamcast. Like you still wanted to import a lot of shit, you know? I think the thing about the Dreamcast is that it has like these incredibly unique moments that feel very experimental. It was Sega at its weirdest in some ways. It was Sega at a time when they had split out all the studios and given them all names. And you're like, here's what UGA is doing. Here's what Amusement Vision is doing. Here's what Sega Rosso is doing. You know, you had all of these kind of different arms of Sega. Sonic Team finally made a good game in Phantasy Star Online. But Phantasy Star Online is a world-changing video game. Aesthetically, gameplay-wise, like at the time it came out, you cannot say, like, the importance of the release of Phantasy Star Online, I don't think can be understated. But here in the US, they tried to market it as like, you know, like here's a picture of Fred Durst and he's telling you that I'm gonna fucking fuck you up on the internet, dog. Let's play some basketball. And the sports games were very well received, and so it became bro-y. in the States a little bit. And that was kind of weird. And so you had this weird identity crisis around like, well, what is the Dreamcast? Like, you're trying to have all, like, you actually, no, you're not trying. You have these really great sports games. You have like a best in class fucking football right now. Even if no one's going to notice because they stuck with the PlayStation and they decided they're going to wait for PlayStation 2, like NFL 2K, 2K1, like those are fucking earth shattering football games for what they were. But then you had Sega at its most experimental in Japan. You had Sega at its kind of, you know, in its wild phase of making all this other stuff that, you know, when that stuff came out, it was just like, that didn't land the same way. And you had these third parties that were following up with anything they could come up with. And here's a better looking version of this Alone in the Dark game that came out on PlayStation. And here's a better looking version of this. And here's, you know, do you want to play NFL Blitz at full frame rate? Yeah, you can. Here's NBA Showtime. Here's, you know, and the run of the Dreamcast is so short and so, you know, like that, and that adds an extra weirdness to it where, you know, you look at the games that were coming out late, and it's all over the place, man. As the Dreamcast kind of matures, you end up with like what, Floygan Brothers, you know, but also you end up with like Alien Front Online, and of course Rez, you know. And like Cosmic Smash, and, you know, like you end up with this stuff that is like very stylish, set against like Rainbow Six Eagle Watch, or like Soldier of Fortune with the most complicated use of a Dreamcast controller and hitting multiple buttons at the same time that you maybe ever saw in your life. It's a console that's all over the place. It's a console that just ultimately, I think, it kind of lacked identity in the US. Because they didn't, it's like they had a wide range of games, but it was never enough for anyone. And it didn't look better enough to, I think, undercut the PlayStation the way that people wanted it to. You know, those versions of Tony Hawk that came out of the Dreamcast, they sure do look better than their PlayStation 1 counterparts. But the Dreamcast controller is not quite the way you want to play Tony Hawk. I did quite a bit, but you have that aspect to it. I don't know. Like, there are amazing. Like, I think Samba de Amigo is one of the best rhythm games of the era. I love Samba. It's so much fun. PSO is a life-changing experience. It is a console that brought the internet to consoles in the U.S. Even if it was over dial-up, someone played NFL 2K against Fred Durst. I'm sure of it. It must have happened once, right? By the time Alien Front Online came out, no one was playing Dreamcast games, and so no one was there to play Alien Front Online anymore. And that was that. But the launch was, I don't know. The launch was very busy. I was very focused on covering the launch, and so it was very hectic. We had gotten games from Sega, I think, a couple of weeks ahead of time, and it was a bunch of first-party and third-party stuff. We had the Sonic Adventure Limited Edition, which was like the first batch that has some difference that they would fix with later versions of the game. I forget the specifics of it, but they tried to do console rentals before the Dreamcast was out. You could rent one and play Sonic Adventure Limited Edition if you wanted to. I don't know. They were trying a lot of stuff, but I think, there's too much momentum behind Sony. 4 years into the PlayStation 1, they were already starting to talk about PlayStation 2, and people were ready for it. And so Sega never really found its footing. There was never a time where the Dreamcast seemed like it was going to take over or be this big game change. It didn't seem like something that was going to change the industry. You know what I mean? the Dreamcast always seemed like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a little bit more powerful than a PlayStation with like a tenth of the games. And you have to import a lot of the best stuff because it's, you know, much like the Saturn, a lot of that stuff is still not coming out here. And so, it kind of just had its own very specific weird vibe. And then the PS2 came out and, people needed a DVD player, and then Grand Theft Auto came out and on the PS2, and that was that. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of, it was over for Sega. But you can see, everyone knew it was going to be over for Sega. I just don't think that everyone knew how quickly it was going to be over for Sega. Because even in the launch, the afterglow of the Dreamcast launch, it was exciting. There were games coming out. There were more games coming. Like Sega had a lot of stuff in the works. They were like, fuck it. We're going to put out a zip drive for the Dreamcast. We're going to, this VMU, you're going to be able to buy one that's also an MP3 player. Fuck it. Like, there was a lot of, just a lot of crazy shit happening around the Dreamcast. There was like some form of excitement around it. But that excitement never seemed like it was mainstream big crazy excitement, with the exception of focus on the sports game. And even then, like, being a fan of the NFL 2K games at that time is probably like being an AEW fan right now. You know that you are watching, you are engaging with a product that is far superior to the established competition. You know that the game you're playing, the football game you're playing, is light years ahead of the bullshit that EA is doing. But there's a mainstream momentum that just doesn't give a fuck, and they're gonna go, oh fuck, that's the bullshit. That's not the real thing. This is Madden's the real thing. And there's gonna be some entrenched audience there that's gonna always feel that way about a thing. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like it was, it just didn't work out for them, and everyone I think knew that was going to happen. Anyone paying attention had a good indication of just like, yeah, this stuff's awesome. But, like, don't get me wrong, Jet Set Radio sure does look awesome, but this isn't. We're not. This isn't like let's be real here. It's not going to, like no one who is, just buying a PlayStation and getting like the bare minimum mainstream video games is going to give a shit about this thing. And that's how it went. But
what's up, your point?
It was a fun launch to cover. I've told the story a zillion times at this point, but flying to New York on the 9th, on the morning of, or on the afternoon of the 8th, landing in New York at like 4 a.m. on the 9th, and going to Good Morning America and talking to them for 4 minutes or whatever about the Dreamcast.
I swear they are.
They're getting back on a plane and flying back to San Francisco.
These people did this?
Getting back to this time zone in time for me to go to the Toys R Us around the corner from the GameSpot office.
This is a torture device.
And picking up the Dreamcast I had pre-ordered there.
Very weird culture.
Then going back to the office and getting right back to work to put up reviews and do all,
we were a sadomasochistic society. Spartans.
There were reviews I think that probably ran before the 9th.
Indians. Indians enjoy pain, dude.
I know we did an import review of Soul Calibur.
All their, what do you call that?
James Milkey reviewed Soul Calibur for us at the time, and he gave it a 10. Dude. And I remember being like, I like this game a lot, but fucking
America has a lot of Indian in it. And whether they admit it or not, they won't admit it, but that explains the American character. They're very violent. Americans are very, very violent, dude.
And
and they enjoy violence.
And I think that's stuck
on themselves too. That's why they'll justify it on themselves. That Spartan
I don't know, man. It was a weird launch because it was this collision. Whereas I think the PlayStation felt like this, like this really good worldwide, flavors coming from different places. the Dreamcast, I think it was probably because we had imported one. The Dreamcast US launch felt like a collision of styles. You know, it was like, okay, like the Dreamcast is kind of into this esoteric stuff, and
sorry, my guy, you just can't move your gun
like, all over
in
the
small
circles. Like, all right, well, there's some interesting stuff here.
It's very
and then,
frustrating.
Like, someone smashed into that with like, here's fucking
what's that called? Sensitivity, something that's just so off the charts.
And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, here's Ready to Rumble, and here's
like doing brain surgery.
Mortal Kombat Gold, and here's
what's up?
NBA Showtime, and NFL Blitz, all these kind of like known quantities or whatever. You're like, oh, okay, cool. I guess this stuff's gonna happen too. And it was just felt weird at the time, and I don't think the console was not around long enough to reconcile all of that stuff. And then you had stuff like Blue Stinger.
Reload.
You're just like, all right. That ain't Resident Evil. And then finally Code Veronica came out, and people were super excited because they're like, man, Resident Evil is on Dreamcast. It looks great, and this is an amazing... Like, people loved Code Veronica at the time. People loved that fucking game. But yeah, September 9th. Hell of a day for video games. Is it the most important single day historically? Probably not. I mean, but it did the most happen on September 9th than any other day in video games. Because wasn't Final Fantasy VII like a... I mean, not that same year, but did that release on September 9th? In the States? Anyway, whatever. That's the news. That is the news. Those were, yeah, covering video games when the PlayStation 1 and all that other stuff was happening was very exciting. Because it felt like there were just games dropping out of nowhere all the time. There were so many games coming out all the time. And they were all games from like major publishers. They were all like kind of on a similar level. It wasn't, we didn't have this kind of like big game, small game, indie game, big indie game, small, big publisher game. Like the stuff, there's obviously like way more games coming out every day now than there was then. But at the time, like all of that stuff felt like a little momentous still. I'm just like, oh, there's just a lot of stuff happening. There was a real hustle and bustle to the game industry as it was then, and trade shows, and you know, just the excitement around all of that stuff was very awesome.
Give me that grip.
And you just saw a lot of different things coming out from a lot of different places, and it was neat. It was neat at the time, for sure. Let's get into some emails. Jeff@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in an email to me there. And I will
clear the room.
I will take a look at it. Cody from Roswell writes in and says, on the birthday of the Dreamcast, I want to ask, was it good? Sure. Emma from Colorado writes in to ask, have you touched Deadlock at all since its announcement? I know you probably aren't interested in another Dota-type beat, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Valve's first original game and what feels like forever. It's also going to be their first game to come out in a post-Steam Deck world, and I'm counting Counter-Strike 2. And they clearly have put more thought into how the game will eventually grow out of it. I'm sure she will. Valve's first console release since Portal 2, or the failed CS:GO port, if you count that. This seems like a huge deal to me, but I could also just be stuck in an era where there were fewer platforms and games didn't get ported to absolutely everything.
Whatever it's been. But no, I could tell she had a good time.
I have not. I know that they have been making big updates to Deadlock recently, like adding new characters and like overhauling aspects of the look of that game, I believe. But they have been putting out.
But yeah, I could tell she was still
new stuff for Deadlock recently that the players that are playing it seem very excited about. I know that was a game that like people seemed very excited about when it first was, just prior to it getting kind of officially
But yeah,
confirmed or whatever. Like there was a real wave of excitement around it,
as
and
soon
then
as she
when
came
they
in,
let
she
people start
told me.
talking about it, people were very stoked.
She's like
And then it
42
kind of
to
went
0
quiet.
at half, Dad.
But they have
I
been
was like, how
continuing
the
to work
fuck?
on that thing, and people do
Playing a
seem
high
to
school
enjoy
football
it.
team.
And people seem to enjoy these recent updates from what I've
That
seen. People
sucks.
seem like they are still stoked on it. And so I
Football
wonder if
games
it's a
aren't
thing
even
that, like,
supposed
when
to
they
get to
release it for
42,
real
dude.
and talk
It's
about
supposed
it
to
more
be like
directly,
12 to 7.
you know, will it enjoy a new
kids.
wave of excitement or whatever? But it seems like people are
Did
into it
she?
for what it is. And
I want to say, I want to see the whole game. Oh, she was. She was.
you say like, will it? But no,
Yep,
I am
having a
not
good
keeping
time.
tabs on it for
Yeah.
to answer your actual question. Do I? You know, you also say, you know, hey, they'll think about how to
Excuse
play
me.
on a controller, which could pave the way for their first console release. You know, maybe you saw the trademark stuff where they trademarked the phrase Steam Frame.
Do they
There's
not?
been rumors of
Well,
this,
you know,
like,
her and I
Fremont
watched that
device
Super
and some of
Bowl
this
last
other
year.
stuff that, you know,
I know she
Valve
watched it. We
seems to
watched
be
the whole day.
prototyping in the backgrounds. Whether some of
Yeah.
that is a standalone VR headset, if that still comes to pass, or if they're going to walk away from that. The future of the Steam Deck, which they were on a stage in Seattle not that long ago, saying that they see it as kind of a generational device, and that they will, you know, continue to iterate on it when they can meaningfully do so. And then, you know, there is talk about what if they got back into kind of the Steam machine business? What if they got back into making a box that you hooked up to your television?
Well, that would be crazy.
So
A box you hooked up to
all
a
of that is to say,
TV and
I
it
don't
just
think
played
Deadlock will be a
games.
console game the
What-
way
what
you
a
are
crazy
thinking. I don't
idea.
think that's a game that's going to come to Xbox or come
And then
to
you just bought something in a
PlayStation
box
per se.
and
I
you
think
brought it
it's something
home
that
and
they
you
will put out
played
on
it
Steam,
and you
and then
owned
they
it.
will eventually have a
And
different
your
way
shit
for
would
you
last
to interact with
forever.
Steam on
You
a
could
television.
sell it 20
that
years
isn't just
later
you
at a
plugging in
garage
Steam Deck
sale
to your
and it
TV,
still works.
or
Holy
installing
fuck, bro.
Bazzite
That Monopoly
onto, well,
game
whatever,
still
you can run
works.
Windows.
Yeah,
Like,
dude,
I
it
have a
still
PC
works.
underneath this television,
There's no
laying on
moving
its
parts
side,
in there to break,
that
dude.
is hooked up to that TV that I can use
That's the
for
amazing
playing
thing
and
about
streaming video
computers.
games.
Well, some of them, they have
And
fans
runs
and
Steam
shit,
Big
but
Picture
still.
mode really well, and
Yeah,
and
no
so
moving parts,
that,
dude.
they could make a more affordable and
Microsoft
sane
found a way,
version
though.
of that, instead of just buying a gaming PC, throwing it on the side, hooking
I
it up
guess
to a
they're still
TV,
wear
and then
and tear.
figuring out, why
Make,
doesn't this display
make shit
properly
thin enough.
for
You
about
get
an
that
hour?
gold thin enough.
Because
wear it
plugging a
out.
PC into a
Yeah.
television is still kind of a dicey affair in some cases. Where you're like, okay, it's the refresh rate's wrong, and so it's not displaying properly, or it's flickering and it's showing up for a minute and then it loses sync. Why is the
But
UI
yeah,
all big?
electronics used
What
to
the
never
fuck is
break.
wrong? Windows, what are you doing to
There's
me?
a
Like,
girl I
there's a
watch
lot
on
of just
YouTube, and
freaky
she
stuff
finds shit from
about
like
doing
Soviet
this.
space
And so,
program.
you know,
No,
there's
it
room
all
for a device
works.
to
It
come
all
out and
lights
do that
up. It
better.
all works. It all she puts
And
power
so
into
I would be
it.
interested to see what Steam
You can
or
hear it
Valve will
humming and
do
shit.
there.
No, you know those old electronics you turned on, you could hear the power.
But I suspect that's their next hardware move,
Holy
right?
shit.
Is some kind of
That's some shit
gaming
that used to
machine that you
scare
hook up
you
to a
when we were
television that
kids.
is
It would,
really
yeah,
just
dude.
a bigger, more
Be
powerful
careful with
version
water.
of the
That
Steam
shit will
Deck
kill you.
concept without the dedicated screen, right?
I remember that hum.
I think
You
that
don't
makes
hear
sense.
that anymore. You turn on your stereo, you'd hear that hum.
Stupid bastard.
Yeah. This shit's all plastic now.
Let's
It's all,
see here.
yeah. It's all cloud. They own the computers now, dude. And oh, here, dude. You just subscribe. I watched a video the other day, and it was like BMW was like
Colton and Fort
charging
Worth
people
writes
a
in,
subscription
take 100 years
service to
after a
unlock
video
the
game
full
releases,
potential of their
and given your
car or
experience with the
something.
medium, what would be your ideal hypothetical
To
vision
unlock the hardware
for
you had
what the
already
state
bought.
of video
Like, you
game
bought the
archival
car.
work would
It
look like
has the capabilities.
in the time the NES
And
and
then
beyond
BMW
turned a
bought
century
something
old?
behind a paywall. I'm like, what the?
That's a question for like
Who
people
could
that are
buy? I
very
was
active
disappointed in
and
German people. I was like,
maybe
I
better
didn't think
studied
Germans would do shit like
in
that.
the archival and preservation space. I mean, there are
Something that's fucking stupid.
standards that, you know, are kind of built. Librarians are the appropriate people for this question, right? But the ideal state of video game
$300,000 for a
archival,
fucking dilapidated house.
I think, is a multi-pronged approach.
I
And
think
it's probably not that different than what we have access to right now.
Just have a shit ton of money.
Where I think that
They're stupid. They're stupid money
the
out
world
there,
of being able to play
taking
those games
stupid loans that they can never
on
pay off.
whatever
They're way
device, whether
overvalued.
emulated, FPGA,
And then when the market
whatever,
crashes and they're
give it
going to be
another
upside down in their loans.
Give it another 50,
Person
60
paid
years, and
$300,000
who knows what will happen in that
market's
space.
gonna crash.
Or
All
whatever.
these
But,
people are
like
going to be
if we're
upside
talking
down
about
in
the
their
NES
loans,
specifically,
it's going to be
which
bad.
let's
It's
narrow
going
it
to be a
down.
fucking nightmare. That's maybe why
That stuff is already well emulated. It's what if we assume we could assume that over the next 50, 60 years that those games will continue to be playable on whatever modern technology is at the time.
He got lucky, sold his house.
A way for you to experience those games.
That
on
house
your
sold
current
and hasn't been
devices in a convenient
occupied.
way.
For $300,000, it's one thing
But
if you bought it for
I think
25,
for
50
archival
grand, and
purposes,
it's a
I
little
think you would
rental,
want
and it's
to
just
be
kind
able
of
to
sitting there.
see. I mean, ideally, you'd be able to get your hands on
$300,000,
this
dude.
stuff.
Nobody spends
Ideally,
that
you would
much
be
on a
able to
rental.
touch an original controller.
An Airbnb? How many times would
play
you have
these
to rent
games
that
on
fucking
original
Airbnb to make it worth $300, $400, $500,000?
And figuring
What's the payment
out all
on
of
that
the,
every month?
the metadata
$2,000
around that. We have a
bucks?
couple people who,
You're gonna rent that
worked in the
fucker out
space,
that much.
Signal Noise says, I worked at a
I don't
library in long-term
believe-
collections, and it was everything from the kind of normal kind of backup stuff, but extremely robust.
Why would they
So,
not
like,
just stay in a
multiple sites,
fucking
multiple forms of
hotel?
media,
Like, I
including
know
tapes.
people do
But then there was a
Airbnbs
lot of
now,
thinking
but it's
about
all
stuff like,
people
how
who
do we
already
make
have
sure that
too
people
much
can
money.
actually read this format? How do you explain a TIFF file to the future? Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, so file formats, and how do you make sure that people can understand what the format? Like, what if this stuff gets lost? What if you have to make this stuff hardened and robust in a way that survives a war? And all the people who understand the INES file headers are dead.
No, that's when
How
you
do
look
they
back
run
and it
a
all looks
game,
funny. Like
then?
this.
How
How
do
did it go
they-
from
How do they pick up
60,000
the pieces and
to
and make that
174?
stuff
And
work
you didn't
again?
put a
Yeah,
new
there's
roof on. You didn't do the air
Yeah, sure.
conditioner.
And then why
how do you preserve this stuff in a way like there's that really far-fetched, or not, it's not that far-fetched, it's like, how do you preserve that aspect of it in a way?
That listings removed, then a month later, now it's up for sale.
It's all
The-
weird
the
shit. Yeah,
archival
dude,
message,
nothing.
right? How do you
sitting
like
there.
fucking
For, like,
lay out?
I think it was.
What if the
years, and for
language?
a
What if
few
people
years,
don't know
nothing.
English? What if you have to
Then all
write?
sold
You're trying to write
listed, Then it
instructions
sold.
for how to play a fucking Super
then I
Mario
tried
Brothers
there
on a fucking fake
3
Nintendo.
years
You have
after
to
it
describe
sold,
what
and-
all of this file
and it sure
means,
didn't
the
look
header on the
like
file,
anybody was
the what
looking
the
there.
hardware it
Like,
ran
if they
on,
were,
like all,
And
like,
it did
all
look
the way
like
down the
anybody
line,
who could
right?
afford
If
it.
you truly want to
the deal
preserve
is
this stuff
anyone
for
who could
generations
get
and
a
generations to come,
$300,000
without making
loan from the
assumptions
bank
that
was
certain
not
knowledge
living
will
there.
always be here.
Now, someone who might have got a
If you want to
$75,000
really start from
loan, or
scratch,
Yeah.
then sure, yeah.
but no,
I
a
mean, those are legitimate
$300,000
issues.
loan
But I think the
means you have
ideal,
two working professionals
yeah,
in the
that
house.
stuff is probably very
It
hard.
means you'd at least have.
But there
the
are people who
lawn
study
done.
that stuff. I
That
don't know.
means you'd mow the yard, have it. No, that means you'd be. That's $300,000 loan, dude. That's not too. That's not a
And so
painter
how do
and a
you,
stay-at-home
I mean,
mom. Like
the SD
that's
card
two
full of
working
ROMs you have is
professional
not gonna,
incomes.
it might not make it.
So, anyways, it just. But all of San Diego looked dilapidated, dude.
But
It
yeah,
looked like
I mean,
no one
my
had painted
vision
their
for how this
house in
stuff
20
should look
years. I think it's a
I
weird.
think that there's
But yeah,
there's
there
the item
was,
itself, which is the
I was
game.
talking to Dad about it. I was like,
You want that to be
a lot
able
of
to
the
be played,
houses on
I
the
think,
street
widely
look great, Dad.
across a
Really?
ton of different devices, the same way that
I think
emulation
all
kind
the
of
old
allows
people
us
that
to
were
enjoy
there
today.
when we lived
You
there
want the
died.
availability
And then
of
their
the
houses
genuine
got sold
article, so that
to
people can play it the
investment
way it was originally
corporations.
played on the
To
controller. It was
family
originally played
members,
on.
and yeah, they
The same
don't
way that
take
people
care
have
of
Their
the
really
shit.
houses
old
the way
record
those
players or whatever.
little
Older
old people did.
yeah.
Like they don't. Like,
But yeah, they go in. They bought it
And
for
then you have the
$60,000. They
context
went in and put new kitchen cabinets and
of
countertops
what
and
that
appliances in.
thing meant
and
when
ripped
it
up the
was
carpet.
released.
and ripped up
But
the
and how it
carpet,
was positioned and how it was
freshened
sent
it
to
up a
people,
little
and did they
bit,
buy it? Was it
and
free? Was
and
it
then something
like the
and tacked on and tried to
advertising,
flip it for.
reviews?
They
The
put in
context
$40,000 worth of work.
and
Yep.
then
of
did
what that
something
thing meant when it
upstairs.
was
They
Oh yeah,
released,
put in a
turned
bathroom,
something into a
and
master
the
bedroom
items
in the
that
back.
were around it.
That's
which would be a big deal.
yeah.
Box
They made
art, the
because they
box
turned it
itself,
from
the
a
instruction manual, the
2, well, 3 if you
the
count the
cultural
downstairs. But yeah,
impact
they turned it
of
from like a
the
2-bedroom
item.
to a 3-bedroom, 3
You need to
bath.
find a
Yeah.
way to
So I don't know
explain
what
that
they
to
did,
people,
but
right?
So, and they might have a big
Because
bathtub,
it's
spa,
you can go
whatever
see
you call
old stuff all
those.
day long, but if you don't have
Spa
the
tub in
context for
there,
it,
big
like,
master bath.
you're
they
Which
might
would
missing
be
out
turn
on the
they
parts
might
that are
turn the
probably
whole
actually
upstairs into
impressive
a
about
master
like
bedroom.
some of
I
that
don't
stuff.
know. Like
Mm-hmm.
you
I can
could,
go look at an
yeah,
old
Big master
building.
it could be a
bedroom.
big master
It was something that I hadn't
Was there
really.
room
It wasn't
downstairs?
until I went to
Well,
Boston
because
for
there's
PAX
there
and spent
the
a good chunk of
upstairs
time
had
wandering around
2
Boston
bedrooms, 1 bath. Then there was a
that
downstairs
suddenly I
that's
was
the
like, man,
walkout
Oh, they might have
basement.
done that. Just did the.
And
these are
they
some
turned
fucking
they
old
turned
ass
that into a
buildings,
master. I
dog.
don't know how they did that, but yeah.
And you realize, like, oh, right, yes, the east coast of
But
this
no, I
country
was
is
halfway tempted
fucking
to go
mad
see if the bank
older than
owns
the
it.
west
You know,
coast of
bank
this
owns it. I was
country.
like, I'm gonna go squat in
And
that house and see what happens.
and it really sunk in about like, oh, right,
Oklahoma's
yeah, I guess
not.
it
They'll
makes
come
sense.
get
Like,
you.
this church
This
is
is a
fucking old,
landlord state.
dog.
But Missouri might
Yeah,
still
you
be
should see
borderline.
yes,
I was like,
yes, I
you might
should
be
see
able
Europe.
to, if the
It's one of these
bank owns
days.
it. Now, I wouldn't squat it if a person owned it. But dude, if
I
a
mean, I went to
bank is
London, but I
holding
didn't
that
really get
title
weird.
or a corporation, if it's not a person who
But I
owns
did
that
have that
house,
Texican
it
Whopper
should be
while I was there,
squatted,
and that
in
was
my
a cultural
opinion,
artifact unto
by another
itself.
company or another who's actually going to do
But
something with
yeah,
it.
so that was
What do you
yeah.
call that?
There's
It's
a lot
not
of
eminent domain, but like you're letting your fields lay fallow. Like
there
you
was
just
yeah,
can't
there
do
was a
that,
lot of stuff
dude.
like that. But
Especially when you're doing it to
I
fuck with
think
people,
that
you know, to
that's the thing you
manipulate
need to
the
kind of solve
market.
for if you're
Like
thinking about like how do you actually
you're
present
farming
video
your
games
fields
to
and
people
keeping these other
another
ones
50 years down the
fallow
line.
so that you can
Who knows what
manipulate the
video games will
price
look
of your
like then? Maybe
crops.
they'll
Like
be gone
I'm
completely.
pretty sure where it gets a little no.
Or maybe people will
We're
still
not going to
somehow
do
be
that.
playing Fortnite and Minecraft. You really don't know.
So
That's true though.
it's bots playing video games. That's what it is.
Yes, I did go to
dude.
Rome, and
Bunch of bots playing
I was not
video
there long
games.
enough. Capcom had a thing in Rome, but we were so in and out, and it was so tightly scheduled that there was not much time to go sightseeing. And so I went to Rome. I had a nice dinner with the Resident Evil team, and in a very dark
Gerstmann got to go to
restaurant.
Rome.
And when we were in the taxi going back to the airport, I saw like, I don't know, the Colosseum. You saw some old stuff, some landmarks in the distance. You're like, wow, that's the thing from the place.
Flew in and
And then
flew
we're
out,
in the place.
basically.
Right.
You get to see anything.
I wish I could go. Well, all right, well, go back to the airport. All right, I got to get to PAX. I got to get to PAX. I got to get back to Boston. And I flew directly to Boston. So yes.
That would suck.
But yeah, I think that's the thing you're trying to solve for, right? Is
But
how do
anyways,
you
yeah, that house
explain
trips
the
me out a little bit.
context of
Trips me out
what
that
made
someone bought
this
it for
work
that much, and it's just sitting there.
interesting, culturally
Like that.
relevant, and popular
Like
in its era.
$300,000, and now it's
And the
I think
impact it
that's-
had
we have
on the years that
hyperinflation
followed,
going
I
on. The
suppose.
kids,
You know, if you're trying
$300,000
to kind of think about video games as a whole,
$100,000 to me and you
you
when
know,
we were
you're
their
gonna-
age.
You're going to
Like
think about
half
the
a
first
million.
Super Mario Brothers, and you're going to go,
half
okay, well,
what the
how much,
fuck?
you know,
Dude,
like
that's
how
a
much
house
time do
in
we want to
San
spend explaining
Diego,
Donkey
bro.
Kong? Do we need to have that here
Like
too?
on the beach.
Or how
Or like
far
an
forward do we
OB
go
or-
talking about this stuff, and you know, like how the impact of Mario
No, this
really,
is
like how relevant is that in this exhibit, or you know, whatever you're
so.
trying to
But
build.
remember when the
Because if you're trying to
Soviet
preserve
Union
everything,
fell
you're
and all
just
that
preserving everything. But, like,
hyperinflation
that's
and all
just
that
a list of
shit?
names,
That's what's happening
right?
to us, but no one will
Like that's a
admit it.
directory full of files.
it's
I have
part
that
of-
now. You know,
I
like, here you go.
It was part of the deal.
It's
The
a fucking
Soviet- I think
terabyte
that
of
in the
main
Cold
ROMs
War,
and
that was
fucking
part of the deal. They were
CHDs,
going
man.
to
You want to play
dismantle
some
the
NFL
Soviet
Blitz?
Union, and
Yeah,
then
what
they
is
were going
that?
to
It's
dismantle
football. What's
America.
football?
Yeah.
Shit.
And we've been in that
All right, hang on.
process
Let me back up.
forever.
Before the
Dismantling
bombs
of
fell,
America. And the rise
society
of China,
used to have
India,
these grand stadiums,
whatever
and they
plan
played
they had, but
sports.
yeah,
and
no one will
sports are
admit
like
it. That's what's
competitive
crazy.
team things. They would get groups of people on either side, and they would
It's
run
crazy
and
to
collide
think.
with each
It's
other.
even like I
and
was
they
thinking
fought over
yesterday. These people want
a ball.
unrestricted, uncontrolled
And then they made
financial
digital versions
markets
of that
got
that you
us to
could
this
play with your
place.
hands.
And you'll have people like Trump who will argue.
There's so
but
much
you're
weird
like Trump,
context
dude.
that, like, if you're really thinking about it as like okay,
casinos won't work
after the
without
fall
rules.
of civilization,
Casinos
how do
are
you preserve
very
this
highly
part of
regulated,
culture?
dude.
That's a much crazier. If
You know
all of
that.
the
You know
stuff and culture
financial
and everything
shit
else still
cannot
exists
work
in some
without the
capacity,
king,
then it's
without
probably a much
somebody in
easier
control.
conversation to go like, that's a
But
football
yet you
video
guys
game. Like,
advocated
oh yeah, video game version
nonstop
of
for
football. Okay.
uncontrolled, and then you're wondering how all
As
the
opposed
markets are
to, okay,
fucked up.
what is football?
My
And what
entire
is
life,
this
you guys have been
video game you speak
dismantling
of?
financial safeguards that were
Um,
put in. And now we're here and everything's fucked up. And you
it's a
own fucking
terrifying thing to consider.
casinos.
But people that I think that are very
So nobody
serious
knows better
in
than
that
you
space
how
in the
tightly
library
you have to
sciences,
regulate
that's the sort of stuff
money
that they
to
probably have
get
to think
shit
about
to
on
work right. There's no casinos in nature.
those are the sorts of questions that they are,
A
trying to answer.
casino
at
is
the
a
end of the
very
day.
fucking
There's
complicated.
like, how do you find ways to
Anyways,
just
you only get
preserve this
casinos
and
in
make sure that you can have
civilized,
relatively free access to this stuff.
the very safety
For people who
to be
want it.
safe in
I
a
think that's
casino,
the thing that gets me
gamble and
you
have.
have these.
Anyways,
Especially now
it's
that
too
we're
much, dude.
increasingly online and
And
everything.
to
You
know
have, like,
that,
the television
to know
museum,
that in your
and you can go
soul
visit
and
it
to
and watch
spout
all
that other.
kinds of shit.
Anyways,
But you
we
have to
got
visit
here
it
because
and sit
they
there and
dismantled
watch the thing.
all the financial regulations.
When, man, what
And
if
now
all
the
that stuff
game's
was just
over in a
online and we could just
monopoly.
watch all of that shit at will?
But just like
and
Jesus
the answer
fucking
is
Christ.
fucking
Anyways.
like that stuff is there under very limited
When I realized
copyright
that,
law, and the exemptions
the
granted to
example is that
libraries are great,
obvious,
but they
a
don't go
casino,
far enough in the
hey,
modern age, and there's more
you
that
guys
can
are
be
all
done there. The Video
lotto,
Game History
casino,
Foundation is,
money, you have to
they've
have
tried to take that
rules, you have to
copyright
have.
fight to,
They knew this was
and
gonna
tried to
happen.
carve
They
out
sold
exemptions for video
everything.
games that don't currently exist, and in ways that will help
So we'll
them
see what
kind of
comes next.
legally do their work.
After
It's
this
one
country.
because that's kind of the other part of this is I think it's one thing
See
for us
what
to talk
comes
about like,
next. I don't know
fuck
what
it,
you
dog, I
think.
got a full
Okay,
MAME set
in
on this
one
machine. Who
country still,
cares?
you think it'll
It's
split
another thing to
between
say,
east, west,
here's a
three
legitimate and
countries?
legal thing that researchers can use
We'll
without
have
fear
the
of
south,
reprisal
and
or
the northeast, and the
lawsuit
west,
or
probably.
any other legal issues coming their
Probably how
way,
the
because this
country will
stuff
break
is
up.
freely available
Because yeah, this
for
ain't gonna stay
research
together.
use or for non-commercial use or for
You got guys in masks
these sorts
running around
of
here.
uses
And
that
it'd
we
be hot
need.
in blue
You need
jeans.
those
You got
exemptions
guys
put in place.
masks
It's
and blue
disgusting that
jeans
stuff continually gets
pretending
shot
to be
down.
cops. Like this shit ain't gonna. That's
As
Conquest
time
Raiders.
goes on, I
That's,
feel like this
that's
stuff
straight
is
up
just
the
getting more
beginning
and
of
more
Josie
important.
Wales. That's where we're at. You know those guys who run in. That's ICE or.
But yeah,
There's a
I
bunch
think
of
that
militia
I want
people
these
who
games. My thing is I want these games to be playable, and they are now. But
That's
again,
Bloody
with that
Bill,
caveat
that's
of like,
Conquest Raiders,
well,
that's
technically
Jesse
this is
James,
like an
that's where
open
we're at
source
right now.
emulator made by
Yeah.
hobbyists, and like they're doing great, they're doing
Because they
amazing
can't pass the
amazing things.
laws they want.
You should go read. There's if you want to read an amazing story of emulation, go to readonlymemories.com. No, I'm sorry, no, that's not it. Was it Rom?
Yeah.
Oh God. Now
And
I'm-
they're masks. I never thought
hang
I'd
on, let
see
me pull
that
up my
in
RSS
America.
reader.
In masks. Cops in masks. What the fuck, dude?
Here, and
that's comic book bad guy
Don't
shit.
listen to
That's
this Daft Punk
Cobra,
record.
dude.
oh,
You
God damn
literally
it.
did Cobra
Subscription
in
manager.
America in front of
Read
all of
only
us.
memo.
Wow. Wow, dude.
Go to
That takes
readonlymemo.com. And
they're all getting
that
their
is
pictures
Wes
taken,
Fenland's
dude.
emulation-focused
Should I go
newsletter
start?
that he runs. He has a really in-depth
Wasn't that
story
a-
of the 16-year journey that it took for Pioneer Laser Active games to finally be playable in an emulator. 16 years. And the amount of technology that had to be developed over that period, like the Domesday duplicator, which allows for like much better preservation of laser discs than we had previously. And if you want to go down a really weird rabbit hole, go read about the Domesday duplicator and
Yeah,
why it
that's
was
my
originally
fault.
created and all of the
And we
stuff
had
that it's used for
sliced
now and
cheese.
everything.
That's right,
The
we got
upshot of
party
this
cheese.
is that
I was
now
gonna
you
say,
can
that was
download
a
a
slice
30
with
plus
like,
gig
I
image
didn't- yeah.
of Pyramid Patrol and play it inside of the emulator known as Ares. Ares will play Genesis-based laser active discs,
That's still pretty close.
including Pyramid Patrol. So you can go play that right now. But again, because it's a laser disc and it needs to be accessed quickly, the caveats there are not only is it 30 gigs, 38 gigs, it's some insane number, You also need to keep it on an SSD because it needs to be accessed very rapidly because laser discs are fucking weird.
I don't know. We'll see.
It doesn't get any weirder.
What, are you really scared of this?
It doesn't get much weirder than laser discs, an analog format, despite looking like a fucking CD. And then the laser active discs are even weirder because there's digital data included on the disc along with all the analog video data. It's fucking bonkers. Anyway, Wes is the whole story with interviews with Nemesis, the guy that did the work. And again, something that he has touched on off and on for 16 fucking years.
What were you thinking of doing?
Crazy that we're finally at this point. It's so exciting that people can like. It's so exciting. As someone who has almost bought a Pioneer Laser Active multiple times, this is great news.
Yeah.
Super happy. Super duper happy.
Super duper.
Let's see here. Ron from Texas writes in and says, I'm going back and listening to a GDC podcast from 2009 where John Drake brings up the concept of OnLive, something that had just been announced a day or two before at that GDC. It seems to have come out of nowhere, and you mentioned you had been able to get your hands on it and tried it out with Burnout to really put it through its paces, and you came away thinking the frame rate was rough, but it was impressive to see it working at all.
You can't play a game without
the conversation continued into a lot of what it still feels like we're talking about with services like the Xbox Cloud gaming. It works okay, but with the lag, the issues with streaming, fast-paced gameplay, and the actual availability of good internet without caps.
You know they were lying the whole time.
Yes.
Someone mentioned they had a 25 gig monthly cap, and OnLive expected its lowest tier to take up 60 gigabytes. And lots of talk about like, well, this might be good for someone who can't afford a good gaming PC, or maybe a less discerning player who doesn't mind the limitations, etc. It was like a conversation I could plop into a podcast today, and people wouldn't know it was over a decade old. I guess my question is, did this technology seem doomed from the beginning? Doomed is maybe too harsh a word, but are these just the limitations of the technology? Fidelity's maybe gotten better, and it seems like we're still struggling with the same things we struggled with from the start. Do you think that there's a way to get past this?
All that shit now.
Or is good enough the best we're going to get from this technology?
Imagine if he had been Catholic and the Pope and him were...
So my understanding is that Sony bought the OnLive tech stack and that it is integrated somewhere into their stuff. I don't know if their cloud stuff is based on the old OnLive tech, but they got it a while ago. And they bought Gaikai. They bought the other thing.
No, they're already trying to call him a martyr.
OnLive. Who ended up with the OnLive tech?
So it's not really.
Did Google buy OnLive? Anyway,
much traction. But now, if he had been Catholic, there'd been a different story. They would actually open up.
I remember hearing that Gaikai deal
trying to get the Pope to recognize it.
Cost Sony an amount of money. They bought both. Yeah, that's right. They bought both.
We do have martyrs.
And they used one but not the other, or tried to anyway. I remember hearing that the deal.
And then they could have kept going with it, make him a
the Gaikai deal was on the verge of costing people their jobs because someone paid way too much for it, and then they had nothing they could do with it for a good long time.
That could have helped the movement. That would have helped their movement. Their figurehead. They're blood martyrs.
But
those Nazis always got to have those
martyrs. They overpaid for what they got out of it, and I think we look at what cloud stuff is now. It's but they have the patents, the OnLive patents. They end up with that stuff and whatever. OnLive, yes. I think that the conversation around cloud gaming has not really changed. That stuff has improved. It's not like the tech has just stood still. Obviously, internet bandwidth has gotten faster in some places. I have internet bandwidth in this house that I could not dream of in 2009. Holy shit.
Why would you do that? Why would anybody do that?
But,
that doesn't seem like
the thing that people always like to say about this stuff is like, you're still dealing with the speed of light, right? You can't beat the speed of light. And the reality of ping times and latency and everything of stuff traveling over these wires,
I guess, is what
or through the air if you're going to try to do
Wi-Fi. Yeah, you go to the casino to play. You can't play casino games at your house, dude.
You're still
So I don't know.
you're still going to have limits. You're still going to have situations here where it's just you notice it, right? And so if your goal is to have it be completely indistinguishable from running it locally, I don't think that that's actually possible right now. I mean, with the technology we have at our disposal, right? And that's sort of the thing is like, you know, maybe we eventually come up with new, yes, maybe if we are quantumly entangling both ends of the cloud infrastructure, then maybe, you know, sure. Maybe some new approach, maybe some new technology actually defeats some of these limitations and we end up with something better. Obviously, video encoding has improved by leaps and bounds since 2009. The speed with which we can decode things in real time, higher efficiency codecs. Like, there are all kinds of things like that that will continue to chip away at some of the walls surrounding this problem, but not all of them, you know? And yes, the predictive tech and look ahead, and I mean, some of that stuff also, yeah, I mean, if you start predicting inputs and branching your video streaming like it was the highest speed Laserdisc game of all time, then sure, yeah, you could do a lot of stuff there too, to try to defeat aspects of that latency. The thing I think we're going to end up seeing is more of this hybrid approach. I think some of the stuff I've had a couple of recent conversations around kind of cloud stuff and ways it could be deployed, and Call of Duty sort of does some of this now, where they are transmitting assets to you as you're playing the game, and so there's a cache on it that you know you can decide how much of that you want to devote to it. There's a setting in the settings that they've had for a little bit, but like it's this thing of like, what if your local device didn't have to be super powerful because you're rendering in the cloud or you're rendering textures? What if everything running locally is just untextured gray stuff, like movie screens, and then the cloud is projecting the textures onto all of those relatively low poly models to clean them up and make them look better and do the things they need to do to kind of have them pop into a better, higher format. So like a hybrid approach of sorts. Where the latency isn't something you're going to feel in the controller, because all of that logic runs locally, right?
Want some of those grades you brought home?
And so that I think is when you maybe this stuff starts to get interesting all over again, is if they take a totally different approach, right? And okay, now we're going to solve this a different way. We know that latency on the controls is an issue, so we're going to find ways to render all of that logic and all of that stuff here. But AI happens over here, and the rendering of textures happens over here, and so we're going to stream textures as you play onto this stuff. Someone is going to try that. I think that is where I think there's some experimentation happening around that at the moment here. Phil Bosch says, makes me think of screen overlays. Sure, yeah. I mean, maybe something like that. I don't know. You know,
go wash up,
overlaying
we're ready.
textures on top of an image, and when it moves out of sync, it happens so infrequently and so weird that it just looks like an extra little bit of blur, or, you know, like they can hide it in different ways. But I think that, you know, like people are trying to attack this problem in a wide variety of ways, right? Because consoles are only getting more expensive. If you could find ways to basically, if you could find ways to dumb down the box that you have to hook up to your TV, it doesn't need to be as dumb as a smart TV app or your phone or just a pure video streamer. But if you can find ways to kind of meet in the middle and find out where you can, okay, this stuff we can afford to render off-site and bring in on a little bit of latency. But this stuff
These
is
might not be good.
like
Because I
mission critical stuff that has to be local because the minute it's off, it fucks up the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you end up in a different.
They're on a
So
stretch
Cocaine Moon
already.
says Flight Simulator
I found
2024
a
does something
mold
like this, right? Yeah, they rely on a lot of that streaming type stuff as well. This will be something that lets, less powerful platforms get away with higher powered rendering. Now, all of this comes at a cost. You know, when you start trying to make this a business, obviously,
Oh, yeah,
that's a whole different conversation, right? The can we do it versus can we sell it at an affordable price? Those are two arms that don't, two sides that don't really talk to each other all that often, right? Until they have to. And so maybe we reach a point where that stuff can be done, but the cost of streaming it to people 24/7, heavy users of games, blah blah blah.
Oh, does it really?
That gets too expensive,
and he doesn't show up in winter.
Doesn't work. Or maybe the economy of scale applies to it, and if enough people shift over to it, it ends up working out. But either way,
my cat comes over here, messes that rug up every time.
I think that we're gonna see some. We're going to see some experimentation along those lines. I think that is stuff that people are starting to think about more and more now, and starting to even probably do, but not on a product level.
Grab the syrup.
Let's see here.
Chocolate syrup. Great strawberries. Refrigerator.
Oh, yeah, I don't think we have time.
Rob writes in and asks about
we not have time
review
for
copies.
I might
was
have
reading
time.
some old EGM issues in the Video Game History Foundation archive, and in one of the letters to the editor section, the editor mentions in passing that sometimes publishers get mad about game reviews and withhold future review copies. I know this is a thing that happens, but I never considered the practice going so far back. In your own experience, was this something that became more or less common over the years? I think it's inherently less common because there are fewer people reviewing games now than there were then. But yeah, that happens, and you kind of you never know where you are on a list, or I'll put it to you, there's definitely been cases, and I'll say there's probably been cases over the last 18 months or 2 years or whatever, where I have gotten a game that I was surprised that I got. And that sometimes it felt like, oh, did I just contact someone who was not aware of the context of this relationship, and they said, here you go,
I missed
before
the
realizing, oh shit.
Board game.
Board
don't
game?
Or do they just not care? Enough time has passed and whatever, it doesn't matter, right? You kind of never know, because you're never going to go ask, hey, you guys hate me or what?
They're in those old comic book shops.
But that was kind of the relationship between the previews departments and reviews departments. Is previews were
they don't go away. They don't break.
Talking about games in a non-critical context. Previews were, hey, here's the top slot of our website. Here's a million eyeballs on your upcoming game. And so there were definitely cases where I would run a review on the reviews side of things, and it would piss someone off. Let's pick someone out of the blue. I don't know, Rockstar. All right, Rockstar is kind of an extreme example, but it can happen with anybody. Bethesda, maybe also an extreme example. Let's not go with any examples. Okay, but a review would run, a publisher would get pissed off, they would contact me, we would go through that rigmarole, and they would go, oh, we're not going to send it. They would, they're not going to ship another game for another 9 months. And they're going to want previews of that game. Like, at some point, GameSpot had a large enough audience at that time that it was very difficult for you to ignore it. It was very difficult for you to cut off GameSpot or IGN, I would say, because IGN was certainly a very big publication at the time. Now they're the biggest, I'm assuming. You could not afford to cut off that audience, because that is where millions of people got their information about video games. And so you could stomp your feet and go, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, but only very few companies would follow through with actually cutting you off. Because they would be the ones coming back around saying, oh, now we've got this fucking Dragon Ball Z game for GBA that no one cares about. Can you guys would you guys be interested in previewing it? Oh God, please. Like the relationship was really more like that. It was more like they were pitching us on, hey, cover this thing. And our job was to cover everything. So we didn't really have to be pitched very hard. It wasn't like it was the cover of Game Informer. It was a website. We had a lot of pages to fill. Infinite number of pages to fill. If we had time to actually generate
you're not
the
even
articles.
like supposed to get a 42.
And so we were, like if you said, hey, do you want to write about a thing? The answer was almost always yes.
Mismatch.
Because that was our goddamn job.
And then it's not exciting to watch either. Like,
and so the relationships would never stay broken for long.
It's not really
there were definitely cases where I couldn't call someone for a game, and I had to have like Ricardo call, who was running previews at the time, like, hey, can you get me a copy of this? I don't want to have to argue with this guy on the phone. And so having that approach was more effective.
Football is usually like, 18 to 24.
But like, yeah, sure. Like that stuff would happen. Rockstar was the only publisher that would try to really, really stomp their feet about it back then. And the end result of that would always be like, you'd run your review, they would feel, oh, well, you didn't respect the achievement enough, and so now IGN's going to get all the exclusive previews on our next game. And you're like, okay, I guess that means we're not going to have like the restaurants of the Warriors, or or whatever. And then IGN would get all the exclusives on that stuff, and then IGN would do something to piss them off, and then they would be back to us. And so it was just this back and forth. It was very transparent, to watch them like throw a fit at whichever of the two companies had wronged them most recently. And Rockstar was the only company that like felt like they had been wronged in these ways. Like it was they were always like super crazy back then. It's not like that now. I think everyone's gotten a little older and a little more like, whatever, man, about some of this stuff. Yeah, it's a good. Seawolf asks, why did Rockstar even care? Most of their games are good. Yeah. But they didn't want you to say their games were good. They wanted you to say their games were changing the world. Like they felt so, and more, like good on them. Like they were big believers in the things that they were doing, right? They felt that the games they were making were landmark moments and these huge, massive things. And if they felt that you weren't like seeing it the same way, they got all bent out of shape. And they would get bent out of shape on like, they're not my stories to tell, but there are plenty of people across this industry that have like fucking wild stories about dealing with the Housers on preview coverage or whatever else, that they were that's just the way they were. And because they were Rockstar, they got away with it. But even when they were just Rockstar and not Rockstar, in the GTA 1, GTA 2 days, they definitely tried to carry themselves that way. And so they faked it until they made it, right? GTA 3 came out, the world changed, and they did it. I thought GTA 2 was cool. But yeah, man, it was just, they were very particular to deal with, and so sometimes they were very weird. But we were never like cut off from any of that stuff. There was some stuff with like when they were supposed to come to the office in Sausalito, and they hadn't contacted us to tell that. It's a crazy story because like someone who I had known for many years at that point was supposed to come by the office and show us a game. We had just started up. We weren't, and he was going to come out and show us, and they were going to drive us they were driving him to the office. The PR people were driving him to the office, but they hadn't contacted us in days. And we were like, is this meeting still happening? What the fuck's going on? It happened to be the release date of the current iPhone. And so we were all going to be in a little late that day because we were going to get iPhones. And then apparently they were trying to get in contact with us to find where the office was. while we were not in the office, and all our phones were being changed over, so the SIM cards were out of them, and so we couldn't receive the phone calls, and so the meeting never happened. And then they said, well, fuck them. At least that's how I felt it went at the time. And then I talked to the PR person long after they had left Rockstar about that moment. And he said, oh, yeah. No, he really wanted to come to the office, but I was told not to bring him there. And so we just drove around and said, oh, I don't have the address. I don't have the address. And ended up not bringing, because someone decided not to. It was like someone above him, and he was like the number 3 fucking guy at the company, which is bizarre to, you know, had apparently decided that the meeting was not to happen, but didn't want to tell him that. That is maybe the most insane thing. Now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm like, oh, that's actually really fucking crazy, huh? But yeah, that was a really insane, like early giant bomb thing.
I'll take the regular.
And yeah, I don't know, man. They were always a really weird company. I'm sure they still are in very different, like probably in some of the same ways and probably some different ways, but like ultimately so many things are different now, and some of those people, like a lot of those people, are gone. So I don't really know what's up with Rockstar. I'm sure they're fine. You know, everyone is mellowed to a certain degree. There was a guy at Ubisoft that was very hard to deal with for a long time, and would be. There were a couple of people at Ubisoft that were very. Like they were a hassle to deal with around review time, in terms of like sending us stuff or not sending us stuff. You know, like there were definitely a couple people there that, you know, you had to kind of smooth talk them to make things happen.
He came in here last night
for reviews, but yeah, like it was, you know, withholding review copies happened. You know, EGM I think pissed off a couple of people. And then they kind of took it public the same way Kotaku did with the Bethesda stuff.
Windowsill, I know that.
And so there were games that EGM wouldn't get, and you know, I don't even know if Kotaku, maybe they still don't get Bethesda stuff. I'm not sure, but that always seemed like some weak shit, man. But Bethesda, I think really the way they tried to like play hardball with people around review stuff was always really dumb. Because they got to a point there for a period where they were like, we're just not going to send out any early review copies. Culinary Disaster asks, did any publisher try to get you to pay full retail price for a review copy? No. No, I would have, you know, if that was the cost of doing, like, you know, if to get an early copy of a game so that we could have a timely review of a game, if they were like, give us $40, $60, whatever, I've been like, okay, sure. I'm like, what? Weird, but okay. But
I got some for you.
But no, that never happened.
Your water brew, yes, we will get it.
Because, you know, and if it wasn't early, then who cares? I can go buy a game at a store. That was kind of always the thing with that stuff is like, really you're just buying yourself 6 or 7 days with no GameSpot review. And what's that actually worth to you in terms of like us not wanting to work with you and finding you to be a pain in the ass and all this other stuff, you know, again, like for as big as we were at the time.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, all right, fucking
Take the bad day to not feel good.
you know, this game's coming out. Like, you can't stop me from getting it and reviewing it. In fact, you're making me want to do that more and more by the minute, rather than jump through your weird hoops and deal with your bullshit. Like, the review will be late, but the review will happen. That's not a threat that the review is going to be bad on purpose or anything like that. But if you're afraid of what we're going to say about it, we are going to say it either way. You can send it to me now and we can just be cool about this, or I can go fucking buy it. I don't care. It'll get reviewed. I'd rather just have more time to work on said review rather than get the game and go, okay, this is your next assignment. Do it as quickly as possible because we're late on it. You know? Like that's the way we had to run things, and you know,
Yeah.
it was something like
Just
later,
like
like around
Grand
the
Theft
holiday
Auto,
season, a
it's
ton
your
of games would
fault,
come
bro.
out, and we
Trust
wouldn't
me.
always get them, and so it was
It's
always a feeling of like
it's something
there
you
were definitely
did
times where
wrong,
like
right?
Alex and I went to like
You gave it an
the fucking
excuse.
GameStop or you know the EB or whatever, and had to buy like 40 games, just stuff that didn't
You
show
did
up
do
or stuff that
something
was like from
right.
tiny
You did
publishers that
something.
was just like, you know what, like I don't even know who to fucking contact about this. Let's just buy it and just move on. Like we have the budget to buy this stuff. Let's just buy it and get going, you know, instead of spending all this time figuring out who can send it to us. Like who cares? Buy these games.
No, that was the whole machine, the perforating, all that.
Fast Guy
Yep.
asks, has anyone ever threatened to
That was
sick their
0.5
unhinged
cents
fanboys
each
on you if you
box.
give their
That's a
thing a
lot of
bad
money,
review?
bro.
No, that's never. No. Let them come. Anyway, that's gonna do it for the show. I didn't realize we had gone
Well,
so
that's
late.
why you
But
so
we are
plant summer crops
late.
in
I
the
gotta go.
summer.
Anyway, have a good rest of your Tuesday. I'll be
Okay,
back
so yeah, so you
tomorrow.
gotta
We'll do
plant
something. We'll
summer
play some video
crops in the
games. We'll
summer.
talk. We'll do something. Have a
Just
good
like
one.
our,
I'll see you soon.
remember our peas
Bye.
died when it got hot?
Camping is
Got
such an
too hot for
adventure.
the peas.
I love how there's a surprise around every corner.
All right,
Except
girl,
when I'm
go get the rest
surprised
of
with a
this
sudden
stuff for your
allergy
lunch.
attack. Luckily, I've got
Maybe, I
Claritin
think
D
some
to
cookies,
attack
maybe?
back.
A little treat. You already
And
have
I didn't even
fruit.
need a prescription for this. Get fast, powerful relief from your
gave you
worst
some
symptoms,
pieces.
like nasal congestion. It's so fast, it starts working in as little as 30 minutes. Now, I can enjoy sleeping under the stars instead of sneezing under them. Claritin clears. Use as directed.
What is your problem?
Anna. Oh, we're taking the Oreos.
Taking Oreos? Okay.
Wait, you're already done with the ramen?
Yeah. I see the thing.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
You hungry?
Yeah.
Let me
Happy
hold
feast day
on.
of
Let me
birth
cook.
of Theotokos.
Show you.
Hey, check this baby speed.
Just only a few days
Look,
ago,
it
we
just
started
got
a
it
new
up that you want.
liturgical year, and
You
today
feel
we
you.
are celebrating the very first feast day of the new liturgical year. It is a wonderful feast day because,
Not burning.
well,
Drink your
we
water.
are
I'll make you something to
celebrating the
eat.
birth of
Drink
Heavenly
your
Mother.
water.
But
Oh, yeah,
also
Dad, we
because
got
this feast day
limited
reminds us of so many
possession.
spiritual things
Game day.
that can
Go.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
to salvation.
Limited edition
Today
game
I'd like
day,
to
huh?
talk about one of those things,
Yeah.
which is joy
She just
and
looks
suffering.
flushed.
Yeah.
Because it is one of the main themes of today's gospel. Today's
Poor
gospel.
baby. After you went out to a football game in the rain, dude.
Draws a little bit of attention to the world around us, people who are around us who might not be
I'm really
Christians.
folks
We
bright
can
like
see
this
that
for
we
long.
can feel
Stupid.
that the world is
I'm just not, because I don't want to.
confusing suffering. This
It's
kind of
good.
thinking
Mom's
this
good.
kind of
You're
thinking has
good.
infiltrated our lives.
Okay.
Okay.
The game's baby.
We
Game
want the
day.
joys of life,
It's like apple
but when
juice and
suffering
what?
comes our way,
I think
we don't know how to deal
I
with
forgot.
it. We don't know how to deal with suffering. And we try to do everything in our power to get out of that suffering as quickly as we can, which can rob us of the true joy that comes from suffering and from accepting this. There is no
Baby,
joy
you just want a
without
little bit of
suffering,
cereal for breakfast?
and no suffering without joy.
It's cold. I don't know if
It's
it'd eat much of
sentimental
anything else.
and
Probably
short-lived,
not.
very short-lived.
Cereal.
Joyless pain
I'm
is
sad that my
Is you high?
Yeah, that is fun.
Is
But they have recently got the
At least you know now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suffered a lot. They could not conceive a child until the very end. They suffered before beautiful joy came into their lives.
Baby girl, you want sausage or just cereal?
While she was giving birth to Theotokos.
I'll
The
cook
joy
you some
entered their
sausage,
lives
okay.
again with a little tiny baby. And for sure, many of us are parents. Suffering was there while they were still upbringing the Theotokos. And the sacrificial love of parents so they could see the joy of their offspring. Do you see the cycle? Why would we think that suffering is not part of our life?
Summertime, gotta water.
It's part of it.
Yeah, gotta water the crops in the summertime.
Without suffering, there is no joy. So how do we approach such a great thing in our spiritual life? How do we accept it? And how do we correctly approach suffering?
Come on, dude. Easy open here, dude. Come on. Easy open. If it was easy open, one side would be a little bit offset from the other, but that costs money. That's how it would be. Right.
Testament or this kind of discussion between God and soul. And in this writing, he's
No rain.
repeated many times that
Oh,
all of the difficulties, all of the sufferings and pains that come into our life is from God. So we can learn how to rely on God. So we can trust God's providence. It is a very difficult lesson to learn.
Very expensive to
It
grow.
benefits us in our life with Christ. More than the words can ever describe. If we accept suffering as something that is given to us from God for our purification, perfect in God's eyes, then we will see that through that suffering,
This ain't funny, Holmes.
joy enters our life. And it's pure joy. Joy that we experience very little of. And eventually that joy will become lasting.
Can we fast forward your life, please?
So let's look at today's feast day.
Come on.
As if every suffering is God given for our salvation.
That's right, dude. Game life.
Will always follow.
Game life.
So let us not be afraid. So let us enter this mission with joy. Most Holy Theotokos, save us.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now, and the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
So again, Donald Trump, it's couldn't be more transparent of a phony liar when it comes. Have you heard of October 7th? Yeah, we've all heard of it. That's why, but that doesn't justify what you're doing.
Speaking of the total control from Israel here, you know what Trump said when he was told by a reporter that about the starvation of children in Gaza? Well, have you heard of what happened on October 7th? Because I'm sure a lot of us don't know what happened that day. So let's take a listen.
Mr. President, you uniquely, you alone in the whole world, have the power to persuade Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the
That's why they can't blame Christians.
Of civilians.
You can't blame false flags on Christians because we're nonviolent. Isn't that amazing? We didn't burn down Rome, dude. Christians are nonviolent. That's how we learn. That's how we win. Ooh, nice. I love that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
I didn't know.
That's why we're nonviolent.
It was not a great day, I'm sure,
you
for a lot of
can't
people,
blame
but
false
the worst day
flags
of
on
humanity.
Christians.
You mean when
That's
people who
the
are
secret,
occupied
bro.
fought back? I don't think that's one of the worst days. I think that every day since October 7th has been a worst day for humanity.
And I mean, that might have been the Susie Wiles Netanyahu talking points, right? Have you heard of October? Everything. Yeah. You ask him a question about the starving children. You ask him a question about, high-speed trains. You ask him a question about the Epstein files. But have you heard of October 7th? Which, by the way, I want to point out again in terms of what happened on that day, right? Immediately thereafter, Charlie Kirk was on the PBD podcast saying, hey, Was there a stand down order? Because
all right, Izzy Bear, come on.
There
Jerusalem.
There was a stand down order, we know now, by whistleblower soldiers inside the IDF who actually worked on the fence. And they said that if there were, they were told to stand down, and they were like, why? Well, there's a sniper. Well, if there's a sniper, we'd be the first ones to know about it. How do you know about it? And so we've already covered that on the show. And so, yeah, there definitely was a stand down order, and this was a setup, and, you know, we've covered it extensively from just using sources inside of Israel, Jewish newspapers and Jewish news organizations, that this was enabled, at the very least, enabled by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, so they could use this as a pretext to go in what they've always wanted to do, which was flatten Gaza and steal all the land in the next to West Bank and do the Greater Israel Project. It's clear to everybody who is not being blackmailed currently by Israel that was the plan all along. Everybody knows it, and but that's all they. So again, Donald Trump, it's couldn't be more transparent of a phony liar when it comes. Have you heard of October 7th? Yeah, we've all heard of it. That's why that doesn't justify what you're doing, right?
No.
And so anyway, and he pretends like that. So that's their answer for everything. October 7th, and when a lot of, if not the majority of people killed on October 7th were by the IDF themselves, because of the Hannibal Directive.
No, but that seems to not penetrate into the U.S. media for some reason. You mentioned the Israeli media being quite honest about what happened on that day, but for some reason over here, I think if you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who would know that kind of thing about how, you know, at that Nova festival, and it's like, how did the paragliders like incinerate, you know, hundreds of cars that were there? It doesn't make any sense. But then none of that stuff really penetrates the mainstream media over here.
And then they immediately buried the cars underground. They
Cobra attack.
So
I mean,
so they wanted to, they literally wanted to bury the crime scene. So they did.
Gonna have to leave.
It's clear what's going on here, and I just don't know how much longer MAGA can go along with this Israeli cucked government of Donald Trump's. I really don't know how much longer MAGA is going to go along with it. I think it's crazy. You see a lot of these MAGA influencers. I only go on Twitter, and they're like, I'm loyal to Donald Trump. Well, there's your first mistake, being loyal to a politician. The politician's supposed to be loyal to you, you fucking chump, on purpose. You're not supposed to be loyal to a politician. They're supposed to be loyal to you. And, you know, Scott Adams said the same shit. You got to trust Trump. You fucking, our government is not built on trust. Our government is built on the preposition that the government's going to lie, which is why we have transparency in government. That's why. Our whole democracy is built on the fact that governments lie, and that's why we have transparency. And so it's obvious they're lying, and it's obviously they're cucked to Israel. And that's just the craziest thing to see the big MAGA influencers say, I'm loyal to Donald Trump. Well, you are a chump.
Come see me on tour in Hermosa Beach, Sacramento, San Francisco. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
Mike Keppel here, Patriot Software's founder. So easy, my dog can run payroll, said one of our payroll software customers. That comment sums it up. There's no training required to use our accounting and payroll software. You can learn it in minutes, and you don't need a college degree. Even though our phone number is on every page of our software, 70% of our customers set up their accounting books and run their payroll without ever speaking with one of our people. That's patriotsoftware.com.
Keep your time and money. What's going on here?
Hello and welcome. Nexus, by Mike Barron and Steve Rude, is a rare comic where both the writing and art complement one another almost perfectly. It's lean storytelling with expressive but not overly rendered artwork and some unique character designs. Even now, some 40 years later, the title stands as a timeless piece of work. Under simple tales of morality, there's a meaningful theme about humanity and responsibility. It explores the shades of gray inherent when exacting an appropriate level of justice without delivering a specific message or drawing any necessary conclusions. Let's get into it. In 1981, the direct market distributor, Capital Comics, decided to add publisher to their business model. The first title they launched was a black and white magazine-sized series called Nexus. It was written by Mike Barron and illustrated by Steve Rude, two newcomers to the industry. Originally, Barron and Rude proposed a series about an encyclopedia salesman set in the distant future. Unsurprisingly, Capital passed on that idea, but they liked the pages Barron and Rude produced, so they asked them to create a superhero title, which was the market they wanted to invest in. The idea that sparked Nexus was Barron wondering, what if every time a superhero showed up, someone died? In the realm of fiction, it might not have been an entirely original idea. After all, that's essentially the foundation for every police procedural TV show. But it was not something that was explored in superhero comics. Furthermore, superheroes were icons of hope. They helped out and tried to keep people safe. However, with Nexus, when he showed up, it meant only one thing. Someone was about to die. So there was a great contrast between what a superhero represented, usually hope and salvation, and how they achieved that goal with violence. Mainstream superheroes stop at the point of terminating a dangerous threat and take a thin moral stand. Nexus did not. The next element was Nexus being haunted by dreams that compelled him to seek justice for the innocent. After that, it was decided that Nexus would exclusively focus on those who committed acts of mass murder. Typically, this would involve the ruling class, but not always. That idea and Rude's character design were approved.
For real, dude.
To give the series a more professional appearance, the artist, Paul Galassi, who was currently working on Master of Kung Fu for Marvel, was hired to produce the first two covers.
Operant conditioning?
As a package, Nexus looked good and it read well, but it was black and white and oversized, which made it less appealing to comic book collectors.
What do you call that?
After 3 issues, this format was abandoned for a traditional, regular-sized color comic. As a side note, the third and final issue of the black and white series contained a flexi disc. This was a piece of plastic, playable on a turntable. It had a theme song and a dramatic reading of that issue. The full version is easy to find on YouTube. End of side note. Nexus was relaunched in 1983. Capital added Badger and Whisper to its ongoing publishing schedule.
Getting really cute.
With that, Capital was officially a new publisher, ready to challenge Marvel and DC.
Ah, come on.
However, by early 1984, Capital suddenly decided to suspend their publishing venture.
The girl thing.
There were a few good reasons for why they did this. The first reason is Capital didn't print enough comics to get a substantial discount from the printer, so their printing costs were much higher than Marvel or DC. Their comics sold well, but profit was not amazing.
I don't think it's ready.
Finally, there was industry chatter about an obvious conflict of interest. With Capital being both a distributor and a publisher, they could, for example, favor shipping their titles before sending out comics from the competition. It's a bad look, and a lawsuit waiting to happen. Overall, they shut down the publishing wing because the comics didn't make as much as they expected. In comparison, the distribution portion of the business was rather successful. Capital was, at that time, serious competition for Diamond Comics, and they would be for many years. So Capital could have invested in publishing and tried to turn things around, or they could shut it down and just focus on the most profitable part of the business. Obviously, that's the option they chose. The publishing rights to all 3 titles, Nexus, Badger, and Whisper, were bought by First Comics, where they would continue on for many years. Although, it was reported that Marvel was keen to acquire Nexus. But Capital was only willing to sell the rights as a package deal, and First was willing to take all 3.
Femininity is a superpower.
While there are some deep moralistic parts of Nexus, those are background elements. The majority of the series is a space opera, with an extensive supporting cast and a number of space adventures. Unlike, for example, The Punisher, it doesn't exclusively focus on Nexus going out on missions. There's a lot of discovery and world building. There aren't depressing long episodes of Nexus searching his soul and having an existential crisis every 3 issues. Primarily, there's a story and a plot that needs a resolution. The character beats happen along the way, as opposed to the story pausing to highlight a moment of doubt or justifying certain actions or deeds. It gets to the point while adding necessary complications, without reading like it's skipping scenes to get to the good stuff. Nexus is Horatio Hellpop. He's an educated, moral executioner who is haunted by visions of mass murderers that deserve to die. Nexus is compelled to find these killers and end their lives. It's not a choice on his part. If he delays seeking justice, the visions he's having will eventually kill him. In fact, Mike Barron once stated, Nexus was reacting in defense. These terrible people, through these visions, have attacked him. His response is self-preservation. Which is, of course, a justification that most would say is quite reasonable, given the context. So, Nexus does what many would consider the right thing, with extreme, life-threatening coercion. The alternative is to die due to inaction over an ethical or moral objection. The underlying question being, why lose your life over principles in favor of someone who lacks those same principles? Of course, no one wants to die tortured and in agony. That's enough incentive. But there's even more motivation when you exchange your life to protect someone who has taken numerous innocent lives. There is no doubt about Nexus. He is an executioner. When he shows up, someone in power, or who formerly had a position of power, is going to expire. There's no trial. There's no weighing of evidence or valid arguments of mercy. If you catch Nexus's attention, your life expectancy can be measured in minutes. At first, the character of Nexus feels impenetrable. He is distant and removed, even to those around him. He's not cold and calculating, like an objective killer robot. He's simply protective. He carries a burden and responsibility that very few people can relate to. He has found an understanding of who and what he is, and he mostly accepts the necessity of his duty. But like any human being, sometimes he questions that role, and he attempts to find freedom from that responsibility. So his level of comfort is always a sliding scale. There's a complexity to the character. It allows the reader to ask a lot of difficult questions. There are contradictions and subtleties, the answers to which aren't forced into your head, which is the strength of the writing. Overall, to put a bow on this, no one would argue there shouldn't be extreme consequences for extreme actions. At the same time, one must ask, is redemption possible for the guilty? Or are there some crimes that exempt you from any type of redemption? This leads to numerous other ethical and moral questions. Horatio's father was the ruler of an agricultural planet. Due to an uprising, he was forced to destroy that world and escape. With his pregnant wife, they find themselves on the moon, Ilum. There they take up residence within the moon's core and raise their son. Horatio's mother mysteriously disappears and dies, leaving him to be raised by two aliens, Alpha and Beta. When Horatio reaches maturity, he begins to have terrible visions. The only thing that helps him during those painful times is the liquid apparatus he lived in following his premature birth. Eventually, Horatio is driven to take action against the person he sees in those visions, his own father. When the deed is done, Horatio returns to normal, and he can live his life as well as he can, until more visions appear. The source of Horatio's power and his visions are not revealed for quite some time. And for those that may be interested in reading the series, I won't spoil that revelation. I will only say it adds even more complexity to Nexus.
Oh, really? Yeah. You
the
and
moon,
Sam?
Ilum, is the base of operations for Nexus.
That's official,
For the record,
huh?
Ilum is short for asylum, or political asylum, since the moon is a sanctuary for victims and survivors of intergalactic dictators. These people are under Nexus's protection, somewhat.
I hope it works
They are
out.
safe, because it would be ridiculous to attack Nexus at his home.
Worked really hard on that
In other
relationship.
words, the protection is implied rather than being explicit.
You did. You worked super
Ilum
hard.
itself is an ancient, abandoned city, created by an extinct race of aliens. There's a lot of room within it, and a fair amount to discover. Again, this ties into the source of Nexus's powers and visions, so I'll skip being detailed. Ilum becomes a melting pot of people from all over the galaxy. The huddled masses form their own loose society and social structure.
That's not very much for catching a
That
mermaid.
said, they were only allowed there by the grace of Nexus, who is a permissive figurehead that could withdraw his support at any time. He doesn't rule Ilum and takes no part of any political process.
cigarettes.
Even though he's generally kind and rarely objects to anything, well, the people have no choice but to follow his demands, if he makes any. Over time, a large supporting cast develops. This becomes the backdrop of the space opera that emerges. There are those that worship Nexus, others that question him, and some that literally support him during the times he needs help. His trust is limited to a few people, and there's always someone looking to exploit his power. It's fair to say that about half the series is about Horatio Hellpop, and the other half is about the citizens of Ilum. There are numerous agendas that develop organically over time. It never delves too far into melodrama or deep existential themes. There's a pretty even balance between the philosophical issues and the dramatic beats it hits. An important distinction is the comic doesn't demand your sympathy, because like any good subtle writing, the citizens of Ilum are a spectrum of motivations. Most are average people, just looking for a place to call home. Some are spies. Some seek revenge and demand justice. Others have delusions of power. So it is a safe place, open to all. But that also includes individuals who may not have the best intentions.
It's gotta be like 1 to 10 for every human. There's like 10 bots trying to shape your opinion and trying to
Now, I've only touched upon the major parts of Nexus, mostly because I don't want to spoil it too much for anyone new to the series. However, I'm going to highlight a few other bits that stand out. Sandra Peel, the love interest of Nexus, somewhat begins as a classic, typical girlfriend. She meets Nexus as a reporter trying to get his life story, and they fall in love. Over time, it's revealed she's actually a spy, trying to learn the source of his power. However, she drank the Nexus Kool-Aid and found him to be an admirable person. Her backstory is filled out, and we discover she's far more than a girlfriend type. The alien, Judah Maccabee, is exactly the type of person you'd expect to be a younger acolyte of Nexus. He's inspired to follow his cause and provide justice for the innocent. At the same time, he's fun-loving and approachable, which complements Nexus's straightforward, to-the-point demeanor. Judah isn't a sidekick, but he epitomizes a lot of sidekick elements. Then there's the heads. Yes, like Futurama would do 20 years later, there are thousands of people who are heads in a jar. Eventually, they form their own distinct society. Most have ESP, or telekinetic abilities. And like in the Matrix, they were once used to provide power, to enhance starships or specific individuals. Clone Zone is a lounge lizard comedian who isn't especially funny. He seems like a throwback to the lesser-known Rat Pack member, Joey Bishop. Or generally, someone who has no talent, but becomes famous for being famous, like a Kardashian. At one point, Nexus goes through his Elvis phase. Over a number of months, after being able to suppress his visions, he gains weight, surrounds himself with sycophants, takes drugs, and develops a tendency to shoot his TV when he gets bored. This is not the only time the series stops to engage in some light satire. For example, much later in the series, the Nexus power leaves Horatio and enters someone who can only be called the extreme 90s version of the superhero. It's Baron playing with the concept and, probably, making fun of the emerging grim and gritty trend. Again, I'm just touching the highlights. There's numerous characters and elements that fill out the series. Nexus clearly shows its influences. Aesthetically, it looks like a cross between an episode of Space Ghost and the classic comic Magnus the Robot Fighter. Russ Manning's seminal work, with an individual doling out justice to robot baddies, bears a similar thematic weight to Nexus. Of course, the work of Jack Kirby and Alex Toth, who designed Space Ghost, have a noticeable presence. There's a good mix of style and substance. Rude's artwork and designs are smooth and clean. Some alien characters, Tyrone for example, are very cartoony, but have a realistic feel. Rude stays within a window of unique appearance and relatability to the human eye. The inker, Eric Shanower, does a very good job of staying out of the way of what Rude puts on the page. The pencils are already strong. It doesn't need further enhancement with extra detail or cross-hatching to distract the eye. The coloring is very muted, which seems to be replicated in the omnibuses put out by Dark Horse.
Yep.
You're
This
becoming
evokes the
cat,
time
you're
period,
celebrating
and
it.
quite honestly, suits the material better than a vibrant palette with
Would
degrees
that
of
be like
shading.
partaking in the
The artwork
Eucharist
doesn't require
lightly?
a slick
That's
coating
the
of
same
paint on
thing,
top of
right?
it.
You're not
It works
supposed
far
to.
better with flatter tones to accentuate Rude's artwork. Coloring purists will appreciate the care in preserving the original, natural color scheme. From what I can tell, it's the original work by the original colorist, possibly from the original color separations. It hasn't been digitally painted to have a more modern look. Speaking of Dark Horse, in an act of generosity, which has to be acknowledged, the publisher of Dark Horse, Mike Richardson, bought the rights to Nexus when First Comics went out of business and was being liquidated. Then Richardson gave those rights back to Baron and Rude. That's a gesture so uncommon, it's admirable and notable. Sure, from that point forward, Dark Horse exclusively published Nexus material, so they benefited. But Baron and Rude were free to take the property anywhere they wanted, which is something they've done in recent years. In fact, the creators have split and pursue their own separate versions of Nexus. In a perfect world of creators' rights, that's the best possible result. It has to be acknowledged that the split was due to Baron's controversial recent work and his subsequent alignment with a vocal subsection of fandom. During the original run, Rude didn't pencil the entire series. After the 50th issue, Rude departs to pursue other projects. Before that, there were some fill-in artists, but Rude was pretty consistent until the anniversary mark. After Rude, Paul Smith and Steve Epting would have notable runs on the title, so the artistic quality remained for the majority of the series. Which again, makes Nexus stand out as a quality comic from that era. For a number of years, Rude attempted to get Nexus an animated series. He even created a trailer, which is available on YouTube. It's quaint, with a distinct 70s Hanna-Barbera feel, which seems suitable, considering the influences on the original comic. That said, that may not be the best style for the material, unless the original tone and subtext was greatly toned down for a younger audience, which kind of bleeds the best elements out of the concept. So it's cute, but maybe not a suitable direction for the character. Canonically, there are 105 issues in Nexus continuity. This includes the 3-issue black and white series, the 80-issue run at First Comics, and the various miniseries done for Dark Horse. From what I can tell, the only canonical story that hasn't been collected is the characters' brief episodes in Dark Horse Presents. Otherwise, everything is collected and available to the best of my knowledge. It's a series worth checking out, or rereading, and rediscovering everything you forgot. Despite its weighty undertones, there's some good escapism, and of course, some wonderful art.
She heard you.
Thank you for watching. This is one of those videos that slowly gestated over a number of years. I fully expect, because of the subject matter and the fact that I use no coded language, the censorship bots will probably ensure it gets minimal attention. I mean, in addition to the fact that it highlights a comic from the Bronze Age. Yeah, I know, it's like I go out of my way to remain obscure. I swear I don't. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe, and join Patreon, like the fine people you see listed on screen. All of whom I humbly thank for their ongoing support. Extra special thanks to Chapel Pluto, John Woolham, Plutocracy, Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sickin, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrew, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gant, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You were all justified and ancient.
Coffee time, girl. Everybody's off to school, work.
Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe.
Coffee time.
I don't know why my throat's so raspy there.
Have you ever had a story that you struggled with? Yeah. You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because I've also noticed that when I mean, obviously I love the Bible stories, but I've also noticed that there's some Bible stories that I don't remember. And especially, there are some parts of Jesus's story, for example, that I tend to forget. Some of the things that he said, which some of the parables that don't make sense or that seem to say the opposite of what Jesus is saying.
Yeah.
And, you know, for example, like for the longest time when I was young, there was a part of Jesus, the part where he says, where he praises the Pharisees. Well, he doesn't praise them, but he says, you know, he says, don't do what the Pharisees do, but listen to them before they're sitting in Moses' seat. You know, and as a kind of young rebel, you know, punk rock kind of teenager, let's say up to my 20s, like I couldn't see that part. I just couldn't see it. And then at some point in my mid-20s, that text hit me. It was like, and I read it and I thought, Jesus says that? And I thought, I've been reading this story for years and I've never seen it, because I'd never seen that Jesus says that, or I've relegated to some dark corner where it doesn't matter, and so those are the types of things that I pay attention to. For example, even in terms of just insight into how profound those stories are. Like there's a part in the gospel where Jesus tells Peter to bring a sword to, you know, at the Last Supper. You know, and I always just would completely ignore that, because the part where Jesus tells Peter not to strike the Roman soldier, that makes sense story-wise. Like it makes total sense. But you don't remember that Jesus told Peter to bring the sword in the first place, because that part bothers you. It doesn't give you that nice, clean, you know, like Francis of Assisi Jesus that you expect. And so even, especially in the story of Christ, are the places where elements of Christ's story, of things that he said or things that he's done that wouldn't stick, just wouldn't hold in my memory, are the ones that have brought me further, because they've compensated for my own tendencies, you could say.
I think you've raised something very important, really, which is what are those stories trying to do to the reader? Because you imagine that any keen editor would have spotted things like this immediately and bit by bit removed the pebbles from the shoe, but they're not in there. And so you come out, if you really are concentrating as you're reading, you're going to come out of it not usually with the fulsome glow that I would receive from an epic myth. I come out of the biblical stories aware that something powerful and rather disturbing has happened that I've only half glimpsed. I've been asked a couple of times, they've said, you know, when you pray, does Jesus sort of stand in front of you in that iconic way where, you know, he's literally facing you like an icon? And I say, not at all. He's a figure moving through the tree line. You know, I just catch glimpses. He's thrilling for me. I never ever feel Christ-like, ever. So that's interesting. Because here's a thing. One of the questions I had before I was a Christian was, how on earth do you follow a figure who is entirely perfect? How do you follow a figure made of light? Because you would know in conventional mythologies, we have very nuanced gods and goddesses. No one is going to Zeus or Dionysus or Athena or Grendel for, you know, an experience of complete, emphatic, you know, luminous wholeness. So that's been one of the challenges for me. I was talking to someone recently and they said, well, reading the Bible is like having a bath, you know, and sometimes the bath feels rather hot as you get into it. And the language is clean. As we've discussed before, it very rarely describes, if ever, the inner condition of anybody. You've got the surface thing, you know, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then there was this, and then they went onto the hill. And as a storyteller, I want to break down in tears, because I'm thinking, this is going to be very difficult for me to tell. I have good news, though. Since I've seen you last, I have started to tell, say, for example, the stories of Genesis up to about the Tower of Babel, and they are fulsome, wild, beautiful, disturbing things, even told orally, but they're not chapter and verse. But I cleave to the narrative. There's a limit to poetically how far I'm going to go with it. But I love it. But as you're saying, I forget because the Bible seems to be sometimes contradictory. I realized a few years ago I was never going to get a clear sense of half of what Jesus was saying until I did the slow labor of the Old Testament, because he is continually, everything is talking to everything else. In Russian fairy tales, if you're trying to get close to the Firebird, she's often in a cage in the wild. If you touch the cage, there's thousands of invisible strings that go off into the forest, and everything suddenly becomes luminous and alerted. And I find the Bible a bit like that. It's got all of these tendrils attached to it, but it doesn't, quite honestly, as someone that's grown up with Homer and Shakespeare, other than the Song of the Songs or Job, it doesn't always give me what I'm hungry for as a word person, but it gives me something deeper.
Yeah, but the figure of Christ is it's definitely, what you said is very insightful, because in Scripture, all the other characters have a light and a dark side, right? You can read almost all the Old Testament stories, and I actually encourage people to do that as an experiment. It's like, read the story of King David from the point of view of King Saul. Like, you can do it, and you can see that King Saul sometimes, if you can make actually King Saul right to some extent in some places where it's like, I don't know about David, he's a little shady. You can do it, even read Exodus from the point of view of the Pharaoh and realize that, he's got his reasons for what he's doing. And so all the characters actually, although the descriptions are sparse, the characters are actually quite complex. And even in the New Testament, you see St. Peter, St. Paul, in the way they present themselves, you can see like their warts, even though they're saints, you can kind of see their warts and their excesses. But Christ is like, it's annoying, because on the one hand, like you said, he presents the perfect person, but then at the outset, that perfect person doesn't look like the way you think it should look. And so he also has like all these multiple aspects that's why we struggle to see it, because we think we have a particular point of view. We think Jesus should be, like I said, he should be St. Francis of Assisi, nice with everyone, hippy dippy Jesus, right? Or he should be, like telling people off, telling them their real truth, getting them the message, making sure that and it's like, if I like one of those, then I struggle to see the other, because it's so complete. And so there's always this prism that I can't completely see through, because it has all these facets that don't seem to usually belong together. Maybe that's the way of thinking about it.
That's exactly right. You can't draw Jesus with one line. I think as a child, I really wanted him to kind of morph into John the Baptist. I really like John the Baptist, or I really like Elijah. Yeah. I really like those kind of guys. And then sometimes he's a bit urban for me. Yeah. But then he's back out praying early in the morning. You don't know what he's up to. You can't pin him down. And on the one hand, Christ is willing to talk to everybody, but beware if you talk to him. Beware, because he's gonna confront you with something. He will expose you. I say this to people all the time. I live in a state as a Christian of intolerable exposure. It's dreadful for me. It's a constant low-level humiliation, because I'm because of all the things that we're describing. Mythology, wonderful though it is, offers you a lot of places to hide, and it allows you to worship, as Paul would say, the unknown God. That's what I did for years. I just lived. Romanticism is a push towards Christian experience, but it's not quite it most of the time. I was finishing a book the other day, and I wrote something that I thought was meaningful to me. I said, every experience of beauty, in every experience of beauty, we are being prepared for eternity. In every experience of beauty, we are being prepared for eternity. I believe that as a Christian, certainly. Those glimpses of something. And it's why, as the romantics say, you know, truth is beauty, beauty is truth. Beauty shows you what you want to defend in your life, what you're going to stand for, how you earn your name. Again, this is the chivalric tradition. This is a very Christly way of living, I think. But, yeah, the Bible, my goodness me, the bits that we forget. I often pick it up and I feel like I've never read it before.
Did you know that Victor Hugo was a visual artist? The man who famously wrote Les Misérables and The Hunchback of Notre Dame made over 4,000 drawings, many of which were scribbled in travel journals, but also fully fledged artworks. These were made for fun so he could, as he said, amuse himself between two verses. None of these were made to illustrate his literary work, nor were they really published at all. Aside from some exceptions, which include this one. This might be my favorite work by Hugo, but we'll get back to it later. By the way, before I forget, I want to welcome all the new subscribers from my previous video. I usually say I read all the comments, but that was like 10,000 comments. I didn't read all of them. I'm sorry. What a shit show. We'll talk about it in the outro. But yeah, hello. Welcome to all the subscribers and also all the new patrons. Thank you so much. If you want to check out Patreon, my Patreon, check out patreon.com/canvas. Very, very well appreciated. Thank you. Now, back to the video. I didn't know much about Victor Hugo's visual work until I found this book in a used bookstore. While flipping through it, these drawings really spoke for themselves, and I knew I had to feature them in a video. They're amazing drawings, very often fantastical. They come straight from Hugo's imagination, very often confronting us with dreams, nature, or time. Castles very often emerge as a recurring subject in these drawings. Hugo advocated to preserve historical buildings back in the 19th century, showcasing a strong connection to history and its vestiges. Many of these castle drawings were made while he was exiled on the island of Guernsey. These castles could represent Hugo's isolation, but also his resilience and stubbornness when facing adversity. Now, before looking into his drawing titled Echelex, it might help to understand why Hugo was exiled. On top of being an incredible writer and a visual artist, Hugo was also a politician. His career took a lot of turns, as did French political history in the 19th century with its 3 revolutions, not counting the one that happened in 1789. He started off as a monarchist and gradually became a proponent of democracy, eventually advocating for free education and fighting poverty. He was exiled once Napoleon III took power in an 1851 coup d'etat. Victor Hugo didn't like the emperor, writing a pamphlet titled Napoléon le Petit, or Napoleon the Small. However, about 20 years after his exile, when Napoleon III, or Napoléon le Petit, left France, Hugo came back and became a senator until his death in 1885. Victor Hugo's longest-lasting political legacy, which he was known internationally for, was his anti-death penalty activism. In 19th century France, the death penalty was pretty popular. Large crowds would gather for public executions. In 1829, Victor Hugo, who was only 25 years old, anonymously published Le Dernier Jour d'un Condamné, or The Last Day of a Condemned Man. The book reads as the journal of a man about to be executed. We don't know the name of the man, nor the reason why he's being guillotined. All we know is the torment, the anxiety, and the torture of a condemned man through his inner monologue. Little side tangent, but if you follow me on Letterboxd, you know that one of my favorite movies is Les Ordres, or The Orders by Michel Brault. In that movie, you follow a bunch of political prisoners in Quebec from the October crisis where Canada suspended civil liberties through the War Measures Act. The prisoners didn't know why they were being imprisoned and didn't know their rights had been suspended. More interestingly for this video, there's this scene where prison guards make a prisoner believe that he will be executed. They were just messing with him. You see the torture and torment that such news can bring on someone. The powerlessness of it being done by the state. The guards even went as far as forming a firing squad where they shot the prisoner with blank cartridges. So to go back to Le Dernier Jour d'un Condamné, the first preface of the book fits in one page. Again, this was published anonymously in 1829, and all the preface said was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's saying this could be the actual words of a miserable man before his execution, or the words of someone, an artist or a poet or a philosopher, who decided to share a fantasy. He says the choice is up to the reader. In a much longer preface in 1832, Hugo admits that, by giving the choice to the reader, he wanted to wait to see if the book would be understood. As it was understood, he claimed the authorship, stating very openly that this book is an anti-death penalty work. Keep in mind, Hugo wrote this in a political climate where the death penalty was very popular. In this book, which I read, Hugo recognizes the atrocious crimes committed by those condemned men, but still advocates for empathy towards them, pointing to their families or how often they come from impoverished backgrounds, or how their actions are the product of their upbringing, likening crime to an illness to be cured rather than a product of evil people. Which brings us back to this work, made in 1854, titled Ecce Lex, which means Behold the Law, made to protest against the execution of John Tapner, who was convicted of murder and executed by hanging in Guernsey, which is why there are no guillotines in this image. In it, light and obscurity clash on an almost floating gallows. A man with an obscured face is hanging. The execution wasn't as nice as it was depicted, though. The rope wasn't long enough, he didn't fall fast enough, and didn't break his neck. Tapner's legs started twitching, and then to swing about. The ropes that bound his arms together unraveled, and Tapner grabbed the trapdoor, pulling himself back up. The executioner managed to get Tapner's hands off the edge of the door, but it wasn't enough. Tapner was still dangling, slowly strangling. The anonymous executioner got down through the opening and hung on to Tapner's legs. Their combined weight was on Tapner's neck, but it still took 12 minutes for him to die. However, this image didn't only represent John Tapner. The face of the condemned is indistinguishable for that reason. The image was repurposed for another man condemned to hang, though this execution was a lot more politically motivated. Don't get me wrong, every execution, especially when carried on by the state, is extremely political. There is a huge difference between murder carried out by a single person and murder carried out with the weight and legitimacy of the state and its institutions. So every execution is political, though some, I'd argue, more political than others. John Tapner was executed for murder, but John Brown was executed for treason, murder, and conspiracy to incite a slave insurrection. If you don't know the story of John Brown, I recommend watching the video I made on a series Jacob Lawrence did about him. But in a nutshell, he wanted to abolish slavery and fought against it. He also
he wanted to kill people, dude, and he found an excuse.
Victor Hugo, though he wasn't perfect, he did defend colonialism, was at least anti-death penalty and also anti-slavery. So the announcement of John Brown's execution resonated with him. He wrote about the execution, pleading the United States to reconsider, saying, "Assuredly, if insurrection is ever a sacred duty, it must be when it is directed against slavery." He also wrote some prophetic words about a possible upcoming civil war. Viewed in a political light, the murder of Brown would be an irreparable fault. It would penetrate the Union with a gaping fissure, which would lead in the end to its entire disruption. he finally ended his letter saying, "For yes, let America know it and ponder on it well, there is something more terrible than Cain slaying Abel. It is Washington slaying Spartacus." Spartacus being the leader of a slave rebellion in ancient Rome, for those who haven't watched the movie. The letter was later published as a pamphlet with other writings by Victor Hugo on John Brown, and it included one of his only published drawings, Ecce. This pamphlet was distributed in Europe and in the United States to denounce the execution of John Brown, and this drawing became a representation of this denunciation. I love Victor Hugo's artworks, and I hope you do too. There are some truly stunning ones, some that are even more visually striking than Ecce, but to me, Ecce becomes powerful because of the message it conveys. This is not a drawing that Hugo made to amuse himself between verses, as he used to say. This is one of his rare visual artworks made out of indignation. Let me know if you share my opinion or if you prefer another drawing by Hugo depicted in this video. I'm really interested in knowing what kind of art my subscribers are into. And speaking of my subscribers, there's Jacob Geller, who's a subscriber I can see on my subscriber list, who made a video on the death penalty, which is a great video, probably one of my favorite videos on YouTube. So go check it out. It's really, really good. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Roman Brandel, X-Towns, and there's a new top-tier patron called Bone Meal. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and also to all the new patrons and the old ones as well, who have been really, really great, like really helpful in supporting the channel and supporting it, because the last video, though it did really, really good, didn't make much money because it was demonetized, obviously. Speaking of the last video, holy shit, right? It went really well, which is good. But, yeah. I got some threats. I got some emails, some comments, some Instagram DMs, many of which sometimes combined threats or like hateful messages with my hair, which I thought was really funny because the hair is a meme, but they made it serious. Anyway, very, very fun stuff. Actually, kind of funny. I like the attention. By the way, the hair, a lot of comments on the hair. I tried something new today. Not bangs, but like kind of parted ways. I just took a shower because someone said, I hope your family goes through this as well. Speaking of Charlie Kirk, and telling me that they hope it happens to me as well, and that I should cut my hair, or no, I should wash my hair or something like that, whatever. So trying something different today. Thank you so much for watching. Very fun stuff indeed. Actually moving to Montreal. I'm signing the lease on Monday. I don't know what else to say aside from thank you for watching and thank you for supporting the channel and all that. Check out my Instagram. I post some comments sometimes that I find really funny, such as the one about my hair I should wash.
Come on, guys.
And my letterbox, of course.
Come on, guys.
That I already plugged. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next video. I don't know what it's going to be about, but it's going to be fun to make, and it's going to be fun to see how you engage with it, with your comments and all that. Right. Goodbye.
Yeah, we need to talk about payment processors again, because the fallout from all of the interference is still unfolding across the industry. We've got some devs on Steam being cut off from early access funding. There are devs using PayPal having a lot of fun, like as an example, one dev claiming that
they're popping in fucking right in front of me, dude.
Pushback, thankfully, is also real, because right now, in the UK, Australia, and Canada, governments are facing public pressure to, well, regulate this payment processor BS. But there is a thread I've got to mention, I've got to call out, and that is people just saying, oh, well, you know, won't really impact me, I don't really care. It's a bit like when people say, oh, I've got nothing to hide, therefore that privacy law isn't really that important. Now, I'd say, if you think this won't impact you, sorry, but I really think you are wrong, especially when we run this experiment across time. This campaign means that huge chunks of the world can't buy games. Any games. And when that sort of thing is happening, no one escapes the effects. Because even if you don't know they're impacting you, they are. Because they're systemic effects that are industry-wide. And that's just one reason why this matters. You know how we live in the Torment Nexus? Well, one little feature of the Torment Nexus is fun things like your insurance provider getting hacked. That actually just happened to people with Allianz Life Insurance just recently on July 16th. What happened is the hackers used social engineering to breach the third-party cloud system and get personally identifiable data on the majority of their 1.4 million customers. And things like that are why I use today's sponsor Incogni, because they're our way to fight back. You see, when data leaks, data brokers exist to harvest that data and sell it on. So if you ever wondered how that spam caller got your number, it's often that, actually. And Incogni solves this problem by automating the legal work that you would otherwise have to do. And the best news is you can join at incogni.com/BadLeaderNews with 60% off the annual plan on my link. Now, here's how it works. Get ready. You enter your information, and that's it. It'll just go do everything. You see, you've got the legal right to have your data taken down, but that takes hours and it's not permanent. So once Incogni's got your stuff, they automatically scan all brokers, they send takedown requests, and they add you to the suppression list. They do that automatically, and they continually rescan so your data is kept down. Just look at my dashboard, 206 sent, 4 in progress, 202 completed, and I'm on 23 suppression lists, which is pretty goddamn good peace of mind. At incogni.com/BadLeaderNews, you get 60% off the annual plan, so just check them out using my link today. If you missed our latest video as well, here's the short version of what happened. Payment processors demanded changes to Steam and to itch.io. But not just that, they fundamentally altered how adult content gets processed, and they've set a terrible precedent for how art can be sold. itch.io, as an example, is still dealing with an incredible, humongous workload, where they're just having to re-index all of their adult works. They're also having to find new payment processors who will accept adult content, and they have loads of devs who are real frustrated with the situation. Over on Steam, well, Valve have delisted many games. They've also changed their rules completely, such that now anything a payment processor does not like can't be sold on Steam. And the inciting incident, I suppose, where this all comes from, it's groups like Collective Shout, where they essentially object to all, quotes, exploitation media, legal or illegal. It doesn't matter to them. It's essentially based on, I guess, personal morals and distaste, which they are totally okay to have. But, you know, it's whenever they try to make them be the morals and the tastes that the rest of us are kind of forced to live by. And they're just one example of groups who are pressuring payment processors. And these processors, well, they're happy to restrict creators from the financial system. We all kind of know that. They're so happy that, in this story, they're allegedly withholding £80,000 from a dev. His crime was that he worked on one of those nudie games. Tut. Let's talk about the 80 grand. It's what one dev has had held in PayPal whenever PayPal froze his account. PayPal basically asked where the money came from. It's a sort of question often asked for financial crime purposes. Now, the dev said that it came from, quote, programming work on video games. Well, that wasn't enough. PayPal dug deeper. They asked for a store page, and when they discovered it was adult content that was legal in the United Kingdom, they refused to release the money. Yeah, because someone who did programming work on a product that's legal in the UK, PayPal? No, can't use that. And the reason why is that it broke their terms and conditions. You see, their rules say any activity, quote, that relates to transactions for digital adult content is a violation. So, getting paid for work on an adult game does count, even if you're just, say, programming the liquid physics. Yeah, so that counts. This isn't really a new thing. It's actually been happening for years. It's one of the reasons why, in this space, nobody really likes PayPal. PayPal even limits accounts for creators with adult Patreons as one example. They withhold payments from creators quite often, and usually it only gets fixed if your complaints go viral enough to, say, warrant a review from Business Insider. And if you think that's oddly specific, yeah, it is, because that's what it took to recover $90,000 in one particular case. And unfortunately, what happens is that the options are continually narrowing for these people. As an example, our developer with the 80 grand locked in PayPal, well, he's being debanked by multiple UK banks. They simply say that it's too risky. Now, you may think, that that doesn't affect you. You're not buying or making adult games. But here's the thing. Valve gives us direct evidence that these demands go way beyond adult games. Back in July, Steam confirmed something shocking. PayPal's acquiring bank, which is the one that processes the payments, made a new rule. And it's one you probably felt, because it was that they would no longer accept Steam transactions in most currencies. They would only accept them in British pounds, Canadian dollars, Australian dollars, American dollars, and Japanese yen. Sounds like a currency problem, right? Maybe it's about refunds and conversions. No, it's not. Steam told Rock Paper Shotgun the truth in the matter, that this is, quote, regarding content in Steam related to what we've previously commented on surrounding MasterCard. What does that mean? Well, it means that anyone trying to buy any products on Steam through PayPal will get punished. And it's all because payment processors don't like legal adult content. I think the words legal need to be emphasized. This is not just about like fringe illegal stuff. This is about mainstream legal stuff. Pretty bad. And for developers, this is another disaster and what's just been an avalanche of bad news. Seriously, it's just been bad. As an example, another thing with Steam, which is early access. And Valence flagged what multiple devs discovered, which is that Steam is denying early access to adult games. For the developers involved, this was obviously a bit of a shock. They had spent weeks going back and forth with reviewers
anymore,
at Steam,
dude.
And nobody mentioned this limitation.
I can't play the game anymore, dude.
Out from launching store pages.
It's
and that
just so
means
oppressive
not
and intense.
just money stuff. No, it means they can't generate followers. It means they can't build wish lists, things that are important for how lots of games are made. And here's what's weird. This isn't even a consistent thing. You see, Rock Paper Shotgun found denials as recently as 2024, but SteamDB shows games released in early access after that point. Games with adult content, that is.
I don't
So it's
know
all
what
quite
they're doing.
strange. Steam's review process page hasn't changed publicly. Since April 2019, adult-only titles needed both store pages and a product build completed for review. Now, Valve warned that it might take a bit longer than 3 to 5 days. I could make a lot of jokes there, but I'll leave those aside. But nowhere does it say that early access is not an option. So this is strange. Something has changed. Valve have not announced the change, though. So if you're making a non-mature game, sure, you can use early access, do whatever you want. But the moment your game might be objectionable on adult grounds, the second it may have a nipple, the restrictions will kick in. Now, this isn't just an annoyance. Things like early access often function as a lifeline. It basically helps developers fund their final development push. That option is now gone for adult devs. That's yet another revenue stream cut off in a world where, basically no banks or payment processors seem to want to touch them. So, what options do we have as a public? Especially if our concern is not just what's happening now, but if our concern is also the direction of travel. As an example, there's a snippet I often brought up regarding MasterCard, where basically their rules talked about what is genuine art. And I don't know about you, but I don't think MasterCard should be the people judging whether something is or is not art. No, I think MasterCard should be processing payments. Remember the Change.org petition from last time? Yeah, Change.org. So a noble effort, but it only gained 20,000 signatures since then. What's actually been more impactful, though, is quite good. It's regional petitions. These have actually cut through, and some of them are getting significant backing. In the United Kingdom, 7,500 people have used the government petition system, where they're demanding that legal content be protected from payment processor bans. Now, we've covered the UK petition's limited power with, say, the Stop Killing Games case, but hitting 10,000 signatures does guarantee a government statement. That's progress, obviously. If it gets more signatures, then we'll maybe see some more progress. Links will be in the sources below. Now, over in Australia, well, the Australian Parliament is facing a different petition. They want antitrust investigations on the same grounds. And with over 6,000 signatures, it's the second most active petition right now. And what's funny is they only need 50 for a response. Well, the one that could be the most interesting is actually Canada. And the reason why is that their petition petitions need authorization from a member of parliament before going public. Now, they only need 500 responses. The good news is they've got 11,000. And their petition requests transparency, better creator rights, and an end to financial discrimination by payment platforms. Okay, what will these petitions achieve? Look, I don't exactly know, but at a minimum, they will force recorded government responses, which in itself is a little useful at least. There are all things being framed around legal content being restricted as well, which certainly helps. The UK and Australian governments have already got online child protection laws, and Canada has been trying to pass one of their own for a few years now. But this thing is different. This is asking whether payment processors are above the law. Because again, we're talking about legal content. And to go a little further, yes, it's the case that, yeah, these are like private businesses. However, we do actually have a lot of legal precedent over things which would be called public utilities, which of course still can be private for-profit businesses, or public businesses, of course. But basically, if you are a utility, then you're treated a little bit differently.
So cheating.
Perhaps you remember all of the net neutrality discussion from years and years ago. The most important part for now
kill
is
anybody.
awareness. Here's a quote from ex-Japanese assemblyman Zenko Kurashita. He told Dan from Mimiko Gamer via automation this quote, precisely because it's made so hard to see. I think most people don't perceive how serious a threat this is. And the companies are exploiting that lack of awareness to maintain their power, which is not healthy. That man is right. The people most affected by this do not have power. They can't go on nationally recognized outlets. They can't bend a leading political representative's ear. So payment processors keep shutting down art in all forms. Because that's the thing here. I'm not asking you to like these games or play these games or anything like that. But the point is, their rights are also your rights, even if you don't like what they're doing. So, even if you don't like what they're doing, you should still support their rights, because those rights are also your rights. This is a very important concept that I thought we all understood as of like 10, 15 years ago. These days, I'm actually not so sure, and that is rather depressing, and it's a part of why this video exists. So the consequences of something like this reach everywhere. Now, the ongoing campaign to do things like jam call centers is actually quite good, because that causes direct operational problems for these companies. That's definitely a good thing. But without highlighting this to people with power, without reaching mass audiences, well, they'll just keep doing what they've been doing. It's times like this where having a press is rather useful. So, hello. That's us trying to, do our job. Because in a world where those who facilitate financial transactions care number one about risk and PR, not legality, guess what that does? Systemically, it means that things will be more safe. And it seems the direction of travel is not positive. So even if you don't like these games, I think you should care. These companies are doing this without a thought for the artistic consequences, without a thought for the impact on customers, without a thought for the impact on society, culture, and in the future, because the only thing they are caring about is short-term, no bad PR, and more money. That's it. And sadly, this is just one of the many ways in which devs can be harried and messed up. And if you want basically an antidote to all of this, check out the story of Team Cherry in this video next.
Represent the set now, homies. It's on now, buggos. Well, excuse me, motherfucker. Come on, stay close. Back off.
Now, there is a new clash between the Pentagon and the press. The U.S. military has rolled out sweeping new rules that force reporters to sign pledges restricting what they can see, where they can go, and even what information they can access, even if it is unclassified. Now, under the new policy, journalists inside the Pentagon will no longer have the freedom to roam around the building or review documents that have not been formally cleared for release. Now, access is now limited to press pens, the courtyard, and a handful of common spaces. And this marks a sharp departure from decades of practice, where reporters had far greater freedom of movement and opportunity to gather independent information. The man behind these changes is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has taken a hard line against the media since taking office. His tenure has seen long-standing news outlets stripped off offices inside the building and press freedom significantly curtailed. Now, free press advocates are sounding the alarm, calling this an unprecedented attack on transparency and accountability at the very heart of the U.S. military. The controversy comes as President Trump escalates his own rhetoric against networks he says are hostile to him, even suggesting their broadcast license be pulled from television outlets critical of his administration. And together, these moves are raising deep questions about the future of press freedom in America and about how much the public will be allowed to see of what is done in its name.
Brothers and sisters, may I never boast of anything except the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. These words of St. Paul the Apostle, at whose tomb we are gathered, serve as an introduction to the commemoration of the martyrs and witnesses of the faith in the 21st century, on the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. As we stand at the foot of the cross of Christ, the means of our salvation, also described as the hope of Christians and the glory of martyrs, I welcome the representatives of the Orthodox churches, the ancient Eastern churches, the Christian communities, and the ecumenical organizations, whom I thank for accepting my invitation to this celebration.
A tutti voi qui presenti.
To all of you here present, I extend a warm greeting of peace. We are convinced that martyria unto death is the truest communion possible with Christ, who shed his blood, and by that sacrifice brings near those who once were far off.
Possiamo affermare con Giovanni Paolo II.
Today, too, we can affirm with John Paul II that where hatred seemed to have permeated every aspect of life, these courageous servants of the gospel and martyrs of the faith clearly demonstrated that love is stronger than death.
Questi nostri fratelli e sorelle.
We remember our brothers and sisters as we fix our gaze on the crucified one. Through his cross, Jesus revealed to us the true face of God, his infinite compassion for humanity. He took upon himself the hatred and violence of the world to share the lot of all those who are humiliated and oppressed. He has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases.
Nostri dolori. Tanti fratelli e sorelle, anche oggi, a causa della loro testimonianza di fede.
Many brothers and sisters, even today, carry the same cross as our Lord on account of their witness to the faith in difficult situations and hostile contexts. Like him, they are persecuted, condemned, and killed. It is of them that Jesus says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account." They are women and men, religious, lay people and priests, who pay with their lives for their fidelity to the gospel, their commitment to justice, their battle for religious freedom where it is still being violated, and their solidarity with the most disadvantaged. According to the world standards, they have been defeated. In truth, as the Book of Wisdom tells us, though in the sight of others they were punished, their hope is full of immortality.
Di immortalità. Fratelli e sorelle, nel corso dell'anno giubilare celebriamo.
Brothers and sisters, during this Jubilee year, we celebrate the hope of these courageous witnesses of the faith. It is a hope filled with immortality, because their martyrdom continues to spread the gospel in a world marked by hatred, violence, and war. It is a hope filled with immortality because, even though they have been killed in body, no one can silence their voice or erase the love they have shown. It is a hope filled with immortality because their witness lives on, as a prophecy of the victory of good over evil.
È una speranza disarmata.
Yes, theirs is an unarmed hope. They bore witness to their faith even without ever using the weapons of force and violence, but rather by embracing the hidden and meek power of the gospel, in keeping with the words of the Apostle Paul. I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong.
Alla forza evangelica di Sor Dorothy Stang.
My thoughts turn to the evangelical fortitude of Sister Dorothy Stang, committed to the landless in the Amazon. When those who were about to kill her asked for a weapon, she showed them her Bible and replied, "This is my only weapon." I remember Father Ragid Ghani, a Chaldean priest from Mosul in Iraq, who refused to fight in order to bear witness to how a true Christian behaves.
Penso al fratel Francis Toffi.
I think also of Brother Francis Toffi, an Anglican and a member of the Melanesian Brotherhood, who gave his life for peace in the Solomon Islands. There are many such examples because, unfortunately, despite the end of the great dictatorships of the 20th century, to this day, the persecution of Christians has not ended. On the contrary, in some parts of the world, it has increased. These courageous servants of the gospel and martyrs of the faith stand as a vast panorama of Christian humanity, a panorama of the gospel of the Beatitudes, lived even to the shedding of blood.
Fratelli e sorelle, non vogliamo dimenticare.
Dear brothers and sisters, we cannot and do not want to forget. We want to remember. We do so certain that, just as in the first centuries, so too in the third millennium, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of new Christians. We want to keep this memory alive alongside our brothers and sisters of other churches and Christian communities. I therefore wish to reaffirm the commitment of the Catholic Church to safeguard the memory of the witnesses of the faith from all Christian traditions.
Per I nuovi martiri presso il Dicastero
The Commission of New Martyrs at the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints is carrying out this task in collaboration with the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity. As we recognized during the recent synod, the ecumenism of blood unites Christians of different backgrounds who together give their lives for faith in Jesus Christ. The witness of their martyrdom is more eloquent than any other word. Unity comes from the cross of the Lord. May the blood of so many witnesses hasten the arrival of the blessed day when we will drink from the same cup of salvation. Dear friends, a Pakistani child called Abish Masih, killed in an attack against the Catholic Church, once wrote in his notebook,
better place. Rendere il mondo un posto migliore. il sogno di questo bambino.
May this child's dream inspire us to bear courageous witness to our faith, so that together we may be leaven for a peaceful and fraternal humanity.
Today, we are going to discuss some extremely controversial topics. And because this is going to go on YouTube, there are certain words I cannot say. So just to warn you, I will write down these words, but I will not say them, because if I do say them, then I will get censored on YouTube. Today, we're going to look at how evil triumphs. Why is the world so evil?
I used to run out of my liquid.
I'm really trying my best. I know that makes it all the more pathetic. I'm really trying my best. I don't know. I'm sort of running out of moves to bring people in. My channel's getting it's getting a fraction of the views that it got a year ago. Even though I'm making the same content, I got the same posting schedule. I'm doing the live streams every week. I'm doing a variety of content. Pretty much, I mean, the content is identical to last year, but YouTube has changed so much. There's so many channels doing really polished content. It blows my mind. It isn't that that there are so many really successful polished channels. I mean, there's just so many channels. For every successful Scott Manley type or Adam Savage kind of channel, there are tens of thousands of wannabe startup channels. They get suggested all the time, in my feed. When I'm looking at a video, it's in the suggested pile. There's always one there where somebody they've put tons of time and polish, and they've got a studio set up in their house or whatever, or they've got their workshop and a bench, and it's clean, and they're using a 6K or 12K camera, and they've got the depth of field and the contrast perfect, and it's beautifully lit and everything, and they're doing full on pedal to the metal content, and it's right there, posted 2 days ago, 8 views total, 10 views total after 3 days or something. It's YouTube is literally saturated with these, high quality channels that are just really don't have any viewership, but they're there in the space doing content. And so there's just, and of course you've got these mega channels that have millions of followers that are making content that I could never do. I mean, I'm not going to be getting into a fighter jet with a squadron and doing maneuvers. I'm not going to be going into space. I'm no longer invited to the Smithsonian to show off, real historic aviation hardware. I don't have any of those seats, but the people who do have those seats, they are, literally bombarding YouTube every day. The aforementioned Adam Savage and Scott Manley, they put up a post nearly every day, and it's always some knock the ball out of the park. It's content that I can't even do. I just don't have access. I'm really scrounging. It's all I can do is do the same FranLab content. I'm just not invited. So all I can do is make stuff on the bench, do stuff at the wood shop, do stuff on the drafting table, do stuff in the studio, just the regular content I do. So it's projecting into next year, what's FranLab going to be doing? Well, I'm going to have to be doing the same content. There's no room for me to grow. The money's not there for really outlandish things like the 0G. That was the 0G flight. That was the last big thing that I'm ever probably going to do on this channel. I can't imagine ever topping that. If I'm going to continue to do content for YouTube, where do I get the audience? You know, the people who were watching my videos 2 years ago, who were enjoying them, they're watching other people now. I'm doing the same content, doing the same kind of teardowns, doing the same kind of, you know, rants, doing the same kind of stuff that I, you know, did, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago. Content's the same, but YouTube is just so saturated with content that, you know, when I ask the question, it usually comes back that people, if they give me feedback, they'll say something like, I just don't have the time to watch all your videos. I don't get noticed when you put something up on Patreon anymore. See, I really don't know where the outreach is. Some people say that I should be on X and stuff like that. It's like, well, I don't see how that would help me. Oh, yes, and the AI channels, oh my God. The endless, ultimate clickbait thumbnail that you click on, and it's just a voice talking like this about something and showing pictures that were gleaned off of the internet. Yeah, definitely not AI. Where's the person doing this? It's usually someone with a British accent. They usually have like a British accent in there. AI voice. Because you gotta have that for authority. It's gotta have a British accent. And it's just a collection of video clips and stills that were taken off the internet. And
didn't mean to do that.
5 minutes long, 10 minutes long.
So yeah,
it's like, where does FranLab sit? I mean, I'd like to continue to do the job. I'd like to continue to make the content, but I mean, last year the very same content was getting 3 times the views a year ago. It's literally like that much. I don't know how I can keep support on Patreon if I'm not getting views. If people aren't watching the videos, how are they going to support the videos? You know, I don't know. I literally have more patrons than I have viewers on the videos. It's really wild, you know. So yeah, I don't know. How do I get the audience? You know, because these days people are only clicking on videos that are about total outrage. I'm not going to do videos about outright politics. I'm not going to be screaming about them. I'm not going to be trying to get people to lose their minds. That's not what I do. I mean, I want to educate. I want to inform people, yes. Inform.
Tell them you're not going to whore yourself out to the algorithm, Fran.
And apparently, you're just not going to be able to work if you're not really making people pissed off at somebody else. That's the thing. The
oh my God, we're talking about the game. The game is the same way. Fran, help me, Fran!
Standing access, right?
Help
because
me.
They're just so beloved. That's certainly not FranLab. Or they have credibility out the yin-yang, and they're just museums that are just going to love their attention. That's certainly not me either. Or they're going to get the viewers just because they're going to make people so upset about somebody in particular or some group of people in particular, and that's going to just give them a flood of views, and they're going to make their channel on that. Well, I'm certainly not going to do that. Well, it's like the people in the chat are saying, you know, people just don't have the time to watch videos. I get it. You know, I'm the same way. I have a certain amount of time I spend just monitoring channels that I watch. But honestly, I have to confess that even like
Mario
videos
Brothers,
like Techmoan's videos have gotten pretty long. In the old days, I might have watched the whole thing, but you know,
the levels change on
50 minutes or so. I'm not going to dedicate that time. 50 minutes to watch a complete, you know, one end to the other review of a boombox. I simply am not going to have that time. So I totally understand it. So that's really a quandary. You know, how does FranLab survive? I would be totally content to do one great video a week if I could. I would love to do one great video a week.
That would be cool.
Like in the old days. We didn't have to put up a video every day.
Every day.
But the YouTube algorithm will not allow that. If I went to doing a video every week, nobody would watch this channel. There'd be no notifications. All of you would cease to know that I even exist after a few weeks, unless you were actually coming to my channel to see that I had posted a video. Because if I put up a video a week, the views would go down to 0. Nobody would be watching the channel anymore. It's just, that's the reality of the algorithm. So I have to put up regular content just for anyone to see any of the videos. And then
Well, if I could get down there, dude, if it wasn't a puzzle, if it wasn't a
you're making
puzzle
videos about all
just to
kinds
get
of
down
subjects, you
here,
must stick into one thing. You
I'd
gotta
already
make all
be
your
down
videos
there.
about one thing. It's like, well, there are channels
That's
that
a
do
fucking
that.
puzzle.
And
All
there are
right,
channels
where are we
that
at?
have built big
Okay,
success on
okay,
that.
now we're out. All right.
But not FranLab. I have never had that audience, that monolithic audience. It's never been like that, and I've never been able to pull that off. The people who watch my channel are not the people that are expecting the same thing from me all the time.
Time to go.
So it's tough. Do some successful channels do one video a week? Yes, they do. But it's only the channels that have momentum. You know, the channels that got really popular early on and have millions of followers, yeah, they do one video a week. Because they have, you know,
I'm just trying to move my. I gotta hold down on the mouse.
But if you're
on the
a tiny
left
little
button
channel and you do a video
and
a
move
week,
it
yeah,
and slightly move it. So I'm putting pressure down on my mouse, which makes it more difficult to move on the desk.
Or people who have
in a pressure
viewership
situation.
outside of YouTube. Musicians, TV
no, man, that just it's a little much.
actors,
It's a little much.
guitar players, writers, people who have some kind of fame outside of YouTube, who also have a YouTube channel. They might post infrequently and, you know, get really great views, but those are all based on, you know, personality. This is the thing, it comes down to this. There was an article weeks ago about the attention economy, and it really got me thinking about my channel and other channels, and this reality that, we're talking 10 years ago, the motto was content is king. What you do, the content you make, is everything. You're selling the content. The content sells itself.
No, now you're selling
We're
you.
here for the content,
Celebrity.
content. That was 10 years ago.
I
But
show
now,
speed.
the focus isn't about content, although having good content is certainly a plus. But it's not really the reason why you're successful on YouTube. It has to do with this attention economy. It really comes down to the idea that the currency that's being exchanged,
Whatever people are talking about. What's the current meme? You got to be on.
Whether or not you're successful on YouTube is not about the content you're making. It's really about how appealing are you. Does the viewer just want to see you? Is being seen the job?
Well, dude. Well, yeah.
It really seems to be true that being seen is the job. And it's not about
It's like
content.
a TV
although,
anchor, dude.
if you make
You're
good
on
content
TV.
on
They
top of
want
being
to.
seen,
They want to see pretty
icing
people on the
cake,
TV.
right? But it's not even essential, because people who are successful on YouTube, well, they can just yell and scream into the camera, or they can just show something into the camera, or they can do their makeup on camera, or they can bake a pie on camera, or they can show you their meal on camera, or they can just show you their car on camera. And it isn't about the content, it's about the fact that in the attention economy, being seen is your job. If you're being seen, then you're successful. If you're not being seen, then you're a failure. And I don't know how to work in that environment. I don't know how to do the attention economy. I certainly don't have the looks for the attention economy.
Yeah,
I don't
you do.
have
For hand, yes, you
appeal.
do.
I mean, there's
You're a
no
beautiful
appeal
girl.
here. I don't have
Stop
a beautiful set filled with beautiful things. What am I selling? For me, I'm still in the age of the work is the work. You know, the idea that what you do should be important, not how you look or what you wear or the stuff. Although, you know, for FranLab, you know, the stuff has always been an important part of FranLab. But for me, this job has always been about the bench. You know, what is on the bench is always the star of the show. But what seems true is that if I'm not actually in the video...
Okay, Cycle Boy. Okay, Cycle Boy. Let's just get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Leave the car. Get another car. Focus is on the
Interesting
car.
the thing on the bench is.
Yeah.
That wasn't
Leave it alone.
true a couple of years ago, but it's definitely true now. When I look at the views that accumulated on stuff I did in the 2.0 lab, I mean, I'm like, my God, I mean,
What's up,
like
my baby?
50,000 views on a teardown video.
Feeling a little better?
I'm lucky if I get 10% of that viewership.
I'm looking for enemy gang members. I
Similar
can't find
video
it.
now. It really is like that big a difference for the same content. And really, when I look at the data, the only real explanation
No,
is just
I don't know
simply
how I got a cop on
YouTube
me there.
itself. You know, I haven't changed.
How do I get a cop on me?
YouTube has changed.
I don't know
many
either,
times
'cause
I'll spend
I don't know
the
how
better
he
part
saw
of a
me.
week on a Saturday electronics video to watch them kind of just face plant. Nowadays, it's like, man, I really did put a week into that, and it's just like, but the video I did 3 weeks ago where I just yelled at the camera for 5 minutes got 5 times the views. It's like, what am I doing? What is my job? Well, it comes down to the attention economy. I'm not being seen in those videos that I put a lot of time into. It's just an interesting project, or it's informative, but it doesn't have my face screaming into the camera in it, so nobody saw it. So it's very frustrating. I really don't know
We get rid of this
how to get
star.
around it. You know, I've been spending a good amount of time this year trying to work out all the little problems of doing manufacturing again. And to see that get crushed by the powers that be before I even got it off the ground, it's just, I feel like there's no way to win, you know? The forces that are acting, and it's not that I'm being singled out. I mean, we're really talking about coast-to-coast pain here. But it just so happens that because I'm a YouTuber, and because I work with, get all the funding from crowdsourcing, and because I'm a maker, and because I build things, because I have to buy things, and because of the nature of the work we do in Fran Lab, it's just that the convergence of issues from the powers that be are making this particular job very difficult.
Okay. Okay.
I just don't know what I'm going to be doing. To be in the crunch, because your business is being crushed from all sides governmentally, between tariffs and trade wars, and you can't export, you can't import, all this stuff.
You do it every time, dude. Bullet miss, bullet miss, bullet miss. Guy behind him gets closer, closer, closer. Bullet miss, reload. Bullet miss, reload. No, dude, it's just fuck the rhythm, dude.
In the lab. Doing it for life, huh? Go berserk. In my lab.
I just give up, dude. I fucking give up, dude. I'm out. That's enough. Time out. Come on, time out. That's enough.